Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. A state of emergency has been declared in Bangkok in Myanmar after a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit Southeast Asia. Israel strikes Beirut for the first time since it agreed a ceasefire deal with Hezbollah. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has said the era of deep ties with the US is over after Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on car imports. We'll bring you all the latest on all those stories in just a moment. But first, it's the Washington group chat everyone has been talking about this week, and the one you were never meant to know anything about. Dubbed Signalgate, the confidential conversations between some of the most senior members of Trump's team, including his vice president and secretary of defense, were leaked by The Atlantic magazine. That's after National Security Advisor Mike Waltz added its editor, journalist Jeffrey Goldberg, to the group. Sensitive messages, including the US attack on the Houthis and the cabinet's opinion of Europe, have been made public for all the world to see, with reporters asking members of the Trump administration who should take responsibility for the scandal. Sky News US correspondent Martha Kelner asked Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. This was her reaction.
Anybody else?
Should the Defense Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
Okay, do you care?
No. You should care about your own borders.
Do you care about American lives being put at risk?
Let me tell you something. Do you care about people from your country? What about all the women that are raped by migrants?
Do you care about American...
No, do you care? Okay,
do you care about American lives being put at risk? About service members fighting for your country?
I don't care about
and your Vice President and your Defense Secretary?
Yeah, this is an American journalist. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm an American, and I'd like to hear your answer to what she's asked.
I'm not answering her question
right,
because I don't care about her network. If you would like to ask, I can answer.
For more on this, I'm joined by Sky News US correspondent Martha Kelner. Martha, thank you so much for joining me. So this clip has gone viral. You've gone viral. What's the reaction been like?
I think a mixed reaction, but I've been heartened by a lot of positive messages. You know, I've had messages from hundreds, thousands of Americans saying that they were embarrassed by the way that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene handled my questions there. A lot of people believe that these are legitimate questions that a elected representative for the United States should be able to answer. And I think a lot of people just saying that they're embarrassed that this encounter took place, you know, within the corridors of the Capitol building, one of the United States' most hallowed institutions. And there she is shouting at me, jabbing her finger in my face. And I guess there's that point of view. And then a lot of people, you know, are invested in Make America Great Again politics and saying, you know, she has a point. You should go back to your own country. So I would say a mixed reaction, but the majority of messages, certainly that I've had, have been positive, have been people saying, you know, this is a very serious security issue, that these were you know, the people at the very highest level of Donald Trump's government discussing attack plans on a Signal group chat, which they invited a journalist to. And that presents, you know, very serious questions about whether this was the only instance of this happening, whether there are other Signal group chats taking place to discuss matters of national security. So, you know, I think a lot of people just saying that Marjorie Taylor Greene should have offered more straightforward answers to my questions.
Martha, let's just chat about the Signal group chat scandal. It doesn't appear to be going away, but it seems like Trump's top team has really, you know, grounded rags. They're not saying anything. It doesn't seem like heads are going to roll. Do you think this is going to carry on until there are repercussions for those in the group?
Yeah, I think Donald Trump and his, you know, inner circle thought that they may be able to tough this out, that they'd be able to navigate their way through this scandal by using this crisis management strategy of deny, deflect and attack. You know, we've seen the journalist Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic magazine, who was invited into that group chat. We've seen him coming under fire from the Trump administration. He's been called a sleazebag by the president, suggestions from the cabinet that Jeffrey Goldberg was just trying to make a name for himself, that his reporting is informed by left-wing bias. So I think the Trump team were hoping that they could try and deflect from the issue at hand here. I think it is proving a more stubborn scandal than they might have realised it would be. A lot of calls from Democratic Party politicians for resignations, for people to lose their jobs over this. I think that a lot of the focus has landed on the Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, one of the most senior officials within that group chat. People also calling for Mike Waltz, who is the National Security Advisor, to lose his job. And, you know, this is not going away. This story is still being covered wall to wall by the American network television channels. So I think it has some way to go. Yeah, I think there still is the possibility that one or more of the individuals involved in that group chat could lose their jobs over this.
Martha, you've also been on the lookout for that American journalist who sort of stood up for you when Marjorie was refusing to answer the question. Have you had any luck?
Not had any luck in finding him, which is quite unusual because, you know, it has gone so viral, this encounter, that I thought there might be, you know, at least some messages identifying this journalist. It's funny because at the end of my face-off, I guess you call it, with Marjorie Taylor Greene, I went back to try and find that journalist to thank him, because actually it is really heartening when you have that sort of back and forth with a politician or anyone really that's so heated. I was so encouraged that he did come to my defence, and you heard him say there, I'm an American and I want to hear the answer to her question. So it would be great to find him, to thank him, because, you know, it's good to have a level of solidarity when elected officials are refusing to answer your question because of something as simple as where you come from or what organisation you represent. It is really helpful to have someone to back you up, to continue asking those questions that demand answers.
You've been in Washington the past week. It's such a polarizing time for the US, as we've just been discussing, especially under the Trump administration. What's your experience been as a journalist right in the thick of it at the White House? What are you hearing?
Yeah, this is a difficult administration to operate within. There's no doubt about that. On the one hand, Donald Trump is very open with journalists. You know, almost every day he makes himself available to journalists on camera, speaking to print journalists as well. And certainly there is more access to him than you had certainly with the last administration, the Biden administration. But this is a difficult climate for journalists to operate in, not just because of the rhetoric. You know, you have the president himself sitting in the Oval Office calling out fake news, in his words, terming certain publications, certain journalists, the enemy of the state. So there's the rhetoric on one hand, but there's also the action that this administration is taking, the banning, for instance, of the Associated Press for refusing to call that body south of the United States the Gulf of America, instead calling it the Gulf of Mexico. They've been banned from White House briefings for doing that. You also have the Federal Communications Commission being very aggressive, ordering this inquiry into the funding of the broadcasters NPR and PBS, because they are seen by the Trump White House as showing left-wing bias. So this is a difficult administration for journalists to operate in. But I guess all the more important then for us to continue asking questions when we can, when we have the opportunity to do so.
So after your viral moment with Marjorie, Martha, do you think you'll be invited back? Are you concerned about this at all?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you're asking difficult questions, there is the concern that perhaps, you may be termed difficult, a nasty person, but I have, I have a right to be in the United States at the moment, according to my visa. I have credentials which allowed me to be inside the Capitol building asking questions that day. So, I very much hope that I'll have the opportunities to continue asking questions of this Trump administration. And as I say, they do give journalists the opportunity to do so. The press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, she's often carrying out press briefings. Donald Trump regularly speaking to the media. So at the moment, there is, access for journalists from across the spectrum to continue asking these questions. So long may that continue.
Martha, I must say, we've all been kept really busy as journalists due to a lot of Donald Trump's breaking news. So let's wish ourselves luck for the next few years of the Trump administration. But thank you so much for joining me. That's Sky News correspondent Martha Kelner there. Once again, thanks so much.
Thank you.
A state of emergency has been declared in Bangkok and Myanmar after a massive earthquake hit the region, with the shocks being felt hundreds of miles away. The death toll continues to rise, and many are believed to be injured after multiple buildings collapsed during the 7.7 magnitude tremor. Here's what some eyewitnesses had to say.
I was on the sofa and I was feeling like, there was a slight sway, and then I could hear a bit of a whooshing sound from the windows, but it was unusual because everything was supposed to be closed. Then I got up and then I felt myself swaying a little bit, so I thought, okay, this is not quite normal. And just as I was about to start taking things, the shaking was really intense. For a split second, I did think, should I go under the table? But then I thought maybe not. I'll just take everything and run down the stairs, which is what I did. So, 15 flights of stairs.
I was sitting in an apartment that I rented. I just had lunch, and suddenly everything started moving around, and I was looking what was happening first. I had no idea.
So I thought I was fainting because everything suddenly shaking just a little bit, and then when you feel harder, and I was turning to my boss and I was like, do you feel the same thing? And she's like, yeah, I thought it was me. And then the light started to fall off the floor, the ground, and then we ran down to the building from 25th floor. Can you imagine that? Don't come to Thailand.
Now, earlier this week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened to seize parts of Gaza if Hamas did not release the remaining hostages. Meanwhile, Hamas has warned they would return the hostages in coffins if Israel does not stop bombing Palestinian territory. The death toll in Gaza rose to over 50,000 days after Israel resumed its military strikes in Gaza, breaking the ceasefire with Hamas. Al Arabiya's Washington bureau chief, Nadia Bilbassi, sat down with U.S. hostage envoy Adam Boehler, who told her the U.S. are adamant they will get their hostages back.
We will stop at nothing if it means getting Americans home, including Idan. There are 4 bodies of American citizens there. But I will say President Trump has given a very specific charge, which is to bring Idan and those 4 bodies home, and also to bring all home from a hostage perspective. So they're connected. This isn't an in and out from our perspective, and it's the way we're going to bring stability to the region, and that's what Steve Witkoff's working on. We work very closely on these things, but I will tell you something. If it means release of hostages, we're always open to having a dialogue, but it's got to be the right circumstances, and it's got to mean the end of terror. Look at how much progress we made. I mean, look at where Secretary Rubio, where Mike Waltz, our national security advisor, where did they hold those talks?
In Riyadh and Jeddah.
In Saudi. Imagine that. Look at the strength of our relationship. Look at where MBS has taken Saudi and the progress that it's made, and the strength it's built, And that's because of his leadership, and having those talks there is recognition of Saudi's partnership with the United States, the durability of things like Abraham Accords building, and a commitment to ending terror together. And so I mean, the region has been very effective. We've worked very closely with the Emiratis. I just went to Afghanistan, and that was facilitated out of Doha in Qatar and with Emirati help. We worked very closely together, and it's made a difference. And so I think you're going to see a new region. This is what Steve Witkoff is working so closely on, which is how do we create a pan-Arabian strength, this strength together, with Israel, by the way, together, to make sure that terror doesn't have existence, and that will mean a lot of strength for the Middle East going forward. And Saudi, UAE, they're prime players in this. Egypt, they're prime players in this because they're allies. And I think we've all been working together to say things like Hamas, et cetera, that has to end. There's no progress happening when people are being taken hostage. It just creates destruction. Now let's focus on our strength as a region, the strength of the Middle East region with our allies. That's what's going to happen.
Israel struck Beirut earlier today for the first time since a ceasefire deal was agreed with Hezbollah back in November. Israeli forces targeted a drone storage facility belonging to Hezbollah, seen as a stronghold for the group. Israel's army has issued a warning on X, telling people to leave the Beirut suburbs as it promised to hit back after strikes from Lebanon. For more on this, I'm joined by Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the United States. Joel, thank you for joining me. So this is the first heavy bombardment since a truce deal in November ended a war between Israel and Hezbollah. We've also seen US-Israeli strikes on the Houthis. Is this a clear warning to Iranian proxies in the region?
Yeah, Leigh Ann, it's great to be with you. And I think it's very clear at this stage that President Trump is fully backing Israel's moves against the Iranian proxies, and the United States ourselves. We engaged the Houthis directly. And of course, as you know, in Washington, there's a big furor over the signal gate. It's being called in a discussion amongst the national security leaders of the country on signal about the attacks on the Houthis. But what's made clear from that is that the United States is going to engage and attack if necessary to protect our interests as well. So that's the dynamic, and Iran needs to pay attention to this because it does not hold a lot of cards when it comes to American and Israeli military action right now.
We know the truce deal between Israel and Hezbollah has pretty much been on shaky ground due to two cases of outgoing fire from southern Lebanon. What does this mean for the ceasefire between these two parties?
So, Leigh Ann, as you recall, the vision for that ceasefire was to try to empower the Lebanese government to fully control all of its territory and to push Hezbollah ultimately out of having any meaningful military role in Lebanon. And I think that's still the goal. Clearly, the United States, when our diplomats go out and engage, and Morgan Ortegas, for example, the deputy negotiator on the Middle East for the State Department, she was out in Beirut not so long ago, trying to push and support and cajole the Lebanese government to take control. But until that happens, I think we're going to continue to see these firefights and flurries. It's in no one's interest to have another full-scale military conflict in Lebanon, but it is going to be happening again and again if Hezbollah is allowed to have free reign in southern Lebanon.
Israel has deployed units around Gaza, where a separate ceasefire has also broken down. Does Israel have the capacity for wider military intervention in Lebanon?
Well, in Lebanon, to your point, Israel's not built for long wars. I should say it like this. Israel's military is a popular military. All adult men and women serve, or those who are within the regulations do serve. But that's not a military built for long wars that continue without endpoints. And so to get a second front in Lebanon while also a major front in Gaza, that would not be received very well amongst the Israeli population. But that said, Israel does want to defend its borders, and the Israeli people do not want to take incoming from Hezbollah. So I think the calibration of how much force to employ is an important discussion, but I don't think you'll see much opposition in Israel to responding to Hezbollah provocations.
And Hamas is still refusing to release the hostages. Right now, we're seeing tension in Israel over this. What is the pressure like in Gaza towards Hamas? Because obviously Israel want their hostages back, and they said they're not going to stop until this happens. Do you think that we're on a really dangerous precipice for military intervention in the Middle East?
You know, my fear in looking at this and watching this now for the last year and a half is that the will to have a full ceasefire and end state to this conflict, ultimately leading to a two-state solution, that will is diminishing by the day. And to your point, which is a very important one, people in Gaza are protesting Hamas right now and its lack of interest in ending this war and in returning the hostages. And the same thing goes in Israel. There are many thousands of Israelis who are protesting a re-engagement without getting the hostages out. So there's a lot of nervousness in the populations, but at the political level, they still have not made the full final decision about how to end this and move forward to an ultimate end of the conflict that provides peace and security for both the Israelis and the Palestinians. And so in the meantime, more military action and less humanitarian aid into Gaza and more continuation of the hostages under the tunnels, in the tunnels in Gaza, seems to be what will be happening as American diplomacy has not yet found a solution to get onto this phase 2 of the ceasefire.
Joel, can I have one very quick final point on Signalgate? Should heads roll?
I do think so. I think that ultimately we're going to have to see a change in some of the leadership, the loss of confidence in the American national security community amongst our uniformed members, service members, as well as severe. People don't like to see double standards in terms of how they're treated. If this were a regular military officer communicating in such a way, they would be stripped of their command and likely fired.
Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the United States, thank you so much for your insights this evening.
Thanks, Leigh Ann.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. US Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife Usha have travelled to Greenland today alongside National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Greenlanders have had mixed feelings over the high-profile visit as takeover talks over the territory grows. Australia will head to the polls on the 3rd of May after Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called for a national election. Albanese's party won the majority of the vote in 2022. However, recent polls show a close tie between the Labour Party leader and the Liberal National Coalition. A 5-week election campaign will now follow, which is expected to be dominated by the cost of living crisis. Now, Buckingham Palace has said King Charles spent a short time in hospital yesterday after experiencing temporary side effects during his cancer treatment. It said the King returned to Clarence House, where he was continuing to work on state papers and make calls from his study. The palace first announced his cancer diagnosis in February 2024. Authorities in Egypt are questioning the crew of a tourist submarine that sunk yesterday and killed 6 passengers. 39 passengers and 5 crew members were rescued from the Sinbad vessel, which sunk in the Red Sea. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has said the era of deep ties with the US is over after Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on car imports. He warned Canadians that Trump has permanently altered relations and that there will be no returning back. Other governments around the world have also criticised the tariffs and threatened to retaliate. For more on this, I'm joined by Paulo von Sarac, the president of the Global Policy Institute and professor of political science and international relations at Bay Atlantic University in Washington. Paulo, thank you so much for joining me. Both economies are extremely intertwined. What impact will Trump's latest tariffs have on the US and Canada?
Well, this is really unprecedented. There have been in the past, issues between the countries which were related to trade. There is an issue about dairy products from Canada, or rather from the United States, that face a very high tariff in Canada. There's the issue of the cost of, say, Canadian lumber. But these are issues that have been discussed and debated in the past, but they never brought the House down saying, oh my God, the whole trade relationship between these two countries is destroyed. Now we are in an unprecedented territory, which is accompanied by the rhetoric that everybody knows, whereby, Mr. Trump doesn't take Canada seriously as a country. He said it many times. So we're going beyond trade. And keep in mind, for everybody to have this in context, that the US, Canada, and Mexico are tied together by a free trade area agreement that was renegotiated by Mr. Trump himself, by his team, during his first term. He said that the previous treaty was bad, but the one that he negotiated, that was under his own auspices, was great. Now, a few years later, he says, no, this is not great at all. This was his own work. So it's very complicated. But, the Canadians are taking this, it seems to me, very seriously, and it will have enormous consequences because, America is the biggest market for Canada. No surprise, your neighbor to the south has a population of 340 million people. That means a lot of customers. Canada is much smaller. There's not a lot that, even in terms of capacity, in terms of American products, that Canada can absorb. So here we go. We are in unprecedented territory. And what has been just announced, and that is the tariffs on motor vehicles, will be a huge blow to the bilateral trade and economic relationship.
Paulo, Mark Carney has also said Canada will need to dramatically reduce reliance on the US and will need to pivot trade relationships. Carney has pretty much come out swinging here, as you say, unprecedented. And we have seen Trump threaten tariffs in the past, but he hasn't necessarily followed through with them. Do you think this change is permanent, or do you think it's temporary?
Well, it's really, really difficult to know because, as you pointed out, Mr. Trump launches ideas, and then he says, okay, no, I changed my mind. Oh, we're having negotiations, say, with Ottawa, and they're very productive, because we, without being tough on them, we forced them to take issues seriously. And now we are negotiating something different, which is to my satisfaction. And so the tariffs are lifted. This could happen tomorrow, for all we know. It's really difficult to predict, this sort of mercurial fashion of making big announcement, changes, modifications, deletions. We really don't know. At the moment, it looks very bad. And as you know, this is really across the board. Tariffs against Canada, tariffs against Mexico, now tariffs, regarding the European Union. It's really odd that we are in this situation, keeping in mind these are the traditional, firstly, certainly in the case of Canada and the EU, these are the historic allies of the United States. Mexico, for better or worse, is the biggest trading partner of the United States in the world, more so than China today. So it's really hard to understand there's some rationale that's been declared by the White House Fundamentally, Mr. Trump says, if we put high tariffs against foreign imports, we will force foreign exporters to the United States to set up business in the United States, put plants in America, produce in America, and so everybody in America will profit because these companies will hire American workers, the products will be made in America, and all will be well. That's one scenario. But many economists and trade experts are skeptical. They're not quite sure that this is going to work this way. And let's add that, at least in the short term, American consumers will be penalized. They're imported goods, and this means 95% of what Walmart, the largest distributor in the world, sells to mostly low-income people in America. These are all imported products. And if you put tariffs on many or most of them, that means that the American buyer will find, the goods in the store more expensive.
So that's something, actually, I just wanted to move on to something there. That's what I wanted to ask you about, because we saw US consumer spending actually rebounded in February. But many economists predict this could be down to higher prices, as you mentioned, in places like Walmart. So there are fears of rising inflation and a possible recession. Do you think these fears are founded?
Well, yes, they are definitely founded. Of course, as you know, economic predictions most of the time tend to be wrong. Even those who do this professionally and advising everybody says, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and then it doesn't, or it happens in a different way. But yes, when you create a situation whereby you are depressing American sales abroad because countries that are targeted by tariffs will reciprocate, right? They will retaliate, and there will be tariffs on American exports. This will depress foreign sales for at least some American products, which means less business, probably layoffs. People will lose jobs because these companies, cannot produce and export as much as they used to. That's one issue, and that's bad. That really is about recession. But then there's the inflationary element, because when you put tariffs on all sorts of imported goods, that means stuff becomes more expensive for the average American consumer, and it's inflationary. And keep in mind that tariffs are regressive. If you raise the price of something that is commonly used by most people, who suffers the most? The low-income people who spend more of their discretionary income on primary goods. A very wealthy person doesn't really care if an imported Mercedes costs $10,000 more. It doesn't really matter that much. But for the low-income American, if the cost of a Volkswagen or a smaller vehicle or a Korean car or a Japanese car, which are very popular here, if you raise the cost of that by $10,000, well, that makes a huge difference.
Paolo von Sirach, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining me. Great insights. President of the Global Policy Institute and Professor of Political Science and International Relations at Bay Atlantic University. Once again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. A pleasure. Thank you.
A reminder of our top stories. A state of emergency has been declared in Bangkok and Myanmar after a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit Southeast Asia. Israel strikes Beirut for the first time since it agreed a ceasefire deal with Hezbollah. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has said the era of deep ties with the US is over after Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on car imports. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. Special interviews with the US hostage envoy and an interview with the Olympic Syrian swimmer are all coming up next, followed by the dressing room. And of course, don't miss Tom Burges Watson with a GNT. Lots for you to watch this evening. Good night and happy Friday.
Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
Thank you very much, Adam, for this interview. With so many things to catch up with since your last interview with us. I want to start with the situation in Gaza. There is so much pressure from the hostage families on the Netanyahu government to do something. With the collapse of the ceasefire, what is the fate of the U.S. hostage now?
I mean, it's as you know, my primary focus is to bring people home. And I think it's what everybody wants, save a few. And those few are the people that we all fight against. They're extremists that want to hurt and kill people. That's Hamas, that's ISIS, that's Al-Qaeda. It's all different names. But I know what Israel wants, I know what the United States wants, and I know what our Arab allies want. And that's an end to this. And we've been working very closely with Israel, but beyond Israel, with Saudi, with UAE. I'm in Doha all the time, Qatar-wise, with Egypt, to bring an end to this, because we need to clamp this down. And the reality here is it all goes down to one country, Iran. And Iran, who attacked Saudi, who, this extremism that threatens things, that's the source, and that's what we're all fighting against.
I'm going to ask you about the role of the Arab allies and on Iran, but I just want to focus on Gaza now. Do you think there is a chance with demonstrations now from against Hamas in Gaza that we've seen in the last 2 days and the pressure from the hostage families that something will happen? Do you think we can resume the talks soon?
I do. I want to say that the people that went out and protested against Hamas took great personal risk. And I think that there's a massive opportunity to end this and bring people home. It has to be done the right way, but I think seeing people on the street recognizing that Hamas has done them a huge disservice, that's very powerful.
So do you still want to negotiate with them regarding Aidan Alexander, which is the only living American hostage in Gaza?
We will stop at nothing if it means getting Americans home, including Aidan. There are 4 bodies of American citizens there. But I will say President Trump has given a very specific charge, which is to bring Aidan and those 4 bodies home, and also to bring all home from a hostage perspective. So they're connected. This isn't an in and out from our perspective. And it's the way we're going to bring stability to the region. And that's what Steve Witkoff's working on. We work very closely on these things. But I will tell you something. If it means release of hostages, we're always open to having a dialogue. But it's got to be the right circumstances, and it's got to mean the end of terror.
All right. You're the one yourself who did have face-to-face talks with Hamas. And you said the purpose was in order to facilitate releasing the hostages. Are you willing to do it again if that means releasing U.S. hostages?
I think President Trump is always willing to have dialogue. It doesn't mean we're accepting any deal. And I want to be very clear. I walked away from those talks. I walked away, and then Steve Witkoff had to walk away. So there were some messages given if Hamas is serious about ending this, and I think they know. And so if Hamas is serious about ending this, if people are serious, then they can move on the hostage side, they can disarm and move things forward. And so they know it. And so the dialogue can be had any time, but it's got to be under the right terms. And President Trump always reserves the right to talk to people, but it doesn't mean we're weak.
What is the right terms?
The right terms is full release of all hostages, disarmament, and the end of tyranny on folks in Gaza. Most people are families. They want to live. They worry about the price of food. They worry about their kids. We're all human. It's time to end this. But if we end it and then it happens again in a few years, we haven't ended anything. So it needs to be taken away writ large so that people can go on with their lives.
Since the collapse of the ceasefire, almost 860 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. Almost 200 are women and children. People, when they see the U.S. weapons being used to kill civilians in Gaza, and they don't see the U.S. equally condemning the Israeli for what they're doing in Gaza now, they somehow, the support for Hamas increases, despite that we have seen in the street yesterday. Don't you see this equation?
I think that right now, we have, let's put blame where blame should go. Blame should go to terrorists. I don't see Israel holding Palestinian civilian hostages. Blame should go, we just were talking about Iran. They're a threat to everything that Saudi, that the US, that we hold dear, which is stability and people. It's never good when anyone dies. I never rejoice in that, no one ever does. And those situations when a human life is lost, any human life, that's a tragedy. And the people that threaten those people are people that are terrorists. So I will place blame where blame is, and I think it should rest there, and we've got to get rid of it because it will stop.
What's your understanding? You, as you said, you were in Doha a lot, you are in contact with the Egyptians. Where are we as we stand now? I mean, are we going to continue like this, or do you think Hamas is willing now to accept your deal that you said you and Witkoff walked away when Hamas refused to accept it?
I think that we're in a totally different, so there's a few things that are very different about this situation. First and foremost, President Trump changed the whole landscape. And it's amazing how quickly things change, because it didn't just change when he took office, it changed when he was elected. So I would say that has been a big change. The second has been the progress that Israel has been made dismantling terrorists, whether it's Hezbollah, that situation, what happened in Gaza, so what happened in Iran, a major weakening from that perspective because of those actions. Those two things make things possible that weren't possible before. And so that's what we're seeing. And so do I believe now, I think people in the region respect President Trump. They respect a man of action. And I think that he will lead us to a place that is peace. He is not a president that wants war. Look at look at what happened in our first term. We brought Abraham Accords. We came together. We want to unite, and we don't want war, but we're not going to make peace in a weak way. He's not weak, he's strong. And I believe that strong leaders are the people that bring a lasting peace.
With Iran in particular, the administration put heavy sanctions on Iran. As you said, they have been affected badly in Lebanon, in Yemen, and in Gaza. But they're still a powerful player in the region. So what exactly, how the administration is going to go ahead in the next few months to deal with the situation as it is now? The proxies are weakened, but they're there.
I think that President Trump communicated very directly to Iran and said that they had a specific time limit. And I believe, and I know, the president will act on that. And I was asked even a lot on TV. They said, well, president said it or else. When's or else? The president always ends up delivering, and you see it now. There's more action on the Hamas side. Israel's driving some of that action because they have to be dismantled. Iran should heed the president's warnings. We did this in the first administration. And the president took very specific action against al-Soleimani and Kataib Hezbollah, for that matter, too. And he is creating a situation where terror will not be accepted. So the message the president sent to Iran was enough. And you're going to end it, and you're going to work with us, or there's going to be real problems. And I believe the president of the United States.
So Iran should read it as this is a final ultimatum from the president of the United States.
I think the president reaches out, and the president likes options. He does not want to go to war. He does not want to take action because those things are never positive. No, as I said, I never rejoice. I don't think people ever rejoice in the negative, but you need to have that strength to drive lasting peace. And so the president has given fair warning to Iran. It's up to them to respond. And if they don't, then the president will take action with allies, by the way, together, with our Arab allies, with the region. We have great allies. This region has supported us so much, and we're proud of our allies, and we'll do it together.
I want to ask you specifically about this, and it's a point that you mentioned. So the Saudis has helped in the releasing of prisoners of war in Russia and Ukraine. You said the Qataris helped the release of U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. Tell us about the dynamics in terms of your relationship with Arab allies to secure the release of whether it's U.S. citizens or others who've been held in different parts of the world.
You know, people ask me all the time whether the Abraham Accords are durable, how I feel about it. Look at how much progress we made. I mean, look at where Secretary Rubio, where Mike Waltz, our national security advisor, where did they hold those talks?
In Riyadh and Jeddah.
In Saudi. Imagine that. Look at the strength of our relationship. Look at where MBS has taken Saudi and the progress that it's made and the strength it's built. And that's because of his leadership. And having those talks there is recognition of Saudi's partnership with the United States, the durability of things like Abraham Accords building, and a commitment to ending terror together. And so, I mean, the region has been very effective. We've worked very closely with the Emiratis. You know, I just went to Afghanistan, and that was facilitated out of Doha in Qatar and with Emirati help. We worked very closely together, and it's made a difference. And so I think you're going to see a new region. This is what Steve Witkoff is working so closely on, which is how do we create a pan-Arabian strength, this strength together, with Israel, by the way, together, to make sure that terror doesn't have existence, and that will mean a lot of strength for the Middle East going forward. And Saudi, UAE, they're prime players in this. Egypt, they're prime players in this because they're allies. And I think we've all been working together to say things like Hamas, et cetera, that has to end. There's no progress happening when people are being taken hostage. It just creates destruction. Now let's focus on our strength as a region, the strength of the Middle East region with our allies. That's what's going to happen.
Was the removal of bounty on the Haqqani was part of the deal to release the U.S. hostage?
Well, I think what Secretary Rubio said, and I'll reference his tweet, which was basically, one, we're always looking at things from that perspective, but if Americans don't come home, then you could see pretty big bounties. You could see pretty big bounties. I think he said greater than Osama bin Laden. And so those bounties, they may move around, but they can come back in massive force if we don't have all Americans out.
I want to ask you about Austin Tice in Syria.
Yes.
Hostage Aid, which is an organization, has been dealing with them. They've been in Damascus many times, and they said they facilitated a meeting with the president of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, with you, if you want to go there. What's the latest in terms of negotiation to release him? Because he seems to have some information about the whereabouts of Mr. Tice.
I think that Austin Tice is a case that has been a driving force on the hostage side from an American perspective. I speak with Deborah all the time. We speak with the Tices. I think we have Americans that we need to find out where they are and bring them home. And we're committed to that. So I will say, if it means the return of an American, we will go to great lengths to do that. And if that's visiting Syria, if that makes a difference, that's fine, we'll do it. So we're looking into it right now. We're always reviewing this information. And somebody like Austin Tice, we will not forget. I will tell you, every time I go to sleep, every time I wake up in the morning, it's the first thing on my mind is every American that is still there. My job is great in some ways. It's great because you're able to take somebody and say, welcome home to the United States. I will also tell you it can be terrible too, because what haunts me is every single American waiting. And we've got to bring them all home.
Do you have any proof of life that he's actually somewhere, held somewhere? There were so many rumors, he's in Iraq, he's in Iran. But it seems that the Syrian president have some indication to where he is.
Well, I think the Syrian president, we've been reviewing information, and I won't comment on things that are, very closely held. But
you're willing to go to Syria if that means you will.
I'll go anywhere in the world. I'd fly a rocket that Elon Musk could supply me to Mars if there's an American there.
Right. Okay. I want to ask you about also the scholar who's been held in Iraq. And last time you talked about her with my colleague, Elizabeth Tsekov.
Yes.
What happened to her? The Iraqi prime minister said that he knew the militia was holding her. Any development in her case?
I think Hezbollah has her, or I know that. And just similar to what President Trump has said to Iran, because they're all related. Extremism won't be tolerated. And I will tell you right now that if she is not released, there are going to be problems. And so I think that message has been delivered, and I expect movement very soon.
Okay, great. See if there's anything else that I haven't asked you about. There is still, as you said, we mentioned Russia. We said there is still American hostages or prisoners that are held there. With this new rapprochement with Russia, do you think that things might ease up to the degree that they might release Paul Wheeler?
I think that we have Americans in Russia, and that has to be discussed and a part of anything that we do with them. It is. Obviously, you see the movement when our envoy, Steve Witkoff, was on a plane, and the difference that made. The president made, obviously, a commitment, actually, in that case, and delivered on that. And that's step one. I mean, look, the nice thing here is we're 60 some odd days in the administration, and I think at this point we're at 37 Americans. At this point in the Biden administration, we were at 0. And so it's just the start. And Russia's a great example of that. There's a lot going on back and forth there, as you may imagine. But it's first and foremost in the president's mind. This is very important. Americans are pretty important to us.
Absolutely. I want to ask you finally about the Abraham Accord.
Yes.
You played a role in the previous one. Mr. Witkoff said that he can envisage Lebanon and Syria being part of it. Do you agree with that? Do you see them being part of it?
I think that if they embrace moderates, because that's what, I mean, look, this is the reality here, and we know this. Your viewers, they're not extremists. The Arab world is not made up of extremists. You have a very small percentage of folks that need to be marginalized, and that needs to be marginalized. But everybody that wants to work for strength in the region and security. So is there a probability or possibility if Syria or Lebanon want to commit to that? I think it's possible. It's always possible. It has to be a real commitment. And I think Steve Witkoff, if that's his judgment and that's the president's judgment, it will be a judgment. Nobody needs to be excluded from this, but they need to have a serious commitment to it also. And it's a commitment against extremism. That's all it is.
But some say that the previous countries who joined the Abraham Accord were never at war with Israel, while the Palestinian issue is the heart of the matter. So as long as there is no solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, on a just solution, whether it's two-state or whatever solution that is agreeable to the main party, which is the Palestinians. You're always going to have extremists in the region. You're always going to have people who will be against Israel as an occupier and against the United States who support Israel. How do you see that?
Well, I think President Trump has made very clear that no people should live in horrible conditions. He's been very clear that the situation in Gaza cannot continue as it does. When people don't have homes, people don't, and as I said, the president has been very committed to rebuilding. We've got to get a situation where Hamas is out. Okay, we've got to, because again, I think from the protests that we see, people in Gaza know that, and then there's a lot that's possible. Again, the president is a peacemaker, but he's a peacemaker through strength and action. And so I think folks all over should know, I know him well, that he means what he says, and that he's committed to action to do things. But a lot's possible there.
I agree with you on all what you said, but the word justice is missing. So it has to be peace through strength, but also justice for all parties, especially the Palestinians. Who get
think, listen, like I said, nobody likes. There's no situation where innocent people dying, anywhere, is okay. Anywhere. And there's no situation where we want people not to have the freedom to live one way or the other. And so terror needs to be removed. It needs to be strong. But we are looking for, and the president said, his suggestions, maybe they're controversial. People didn't like shifting, these kind of things. But what is at the heart of what President Trump said? What is at the heart of what President Trump said is he knows that people don't want to live where there's no homes, where it's, so that is, I know him, that's the heart of it, and he's providing solutions. If there's better solutions, he's open to it. But people should know that the president is committed to that, because that's what drives security over time.
From the White House to Gaza, Kyiv to Beijing, elections, economics, and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake, and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
It's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
Presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on The Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Hello and welcome to this special interview. I'm Joanne Surya. My guest today is an Olympic swimmer, UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador, and someone whose extraordinary journey from war-torn Syria to the global stage has inspired millions. So much so, her story became the subject of a powerful Netflix movie. She recently returned to Syria for the first time in a decade, and today she's with us to reflect on that emotional homecoming and the legacy she's building. Yusra Mardini, thank you and welcome to Al Arabiya.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. First, I want to start with your recent return to Syria. It was your first time back in 10 years. Describe what it felt like when you first arrived.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it was very emotional for me. I was in complete denial. It felt like I was dreaming. The point where I crossed the Lebanese borders and I was like in Syria, like I was on my way, and I was like, I saw "Welcome to Syria." I immediately started crying, and it was more emotional that my mom was sitting next to me, and it was also her first time in 10 years. So I felt very, very grateful and lucky to be able to go back.
Great. And you did share powerful footage of the destruction, even where your family's home once stood. What was more difficult, leaving that first time at the start of the war, or going back now and seeing all the destruction?
I think there are two completely different experiences. When Also, I'm in a different age in my life. When I left, I was 17 years old, and now I'm 27. So I learned a lot in the past 10 years, and I grew up a lot. And for me, when I left, I was a child. I didn't understand what sides, what's going on, politics, nothing. I just knew that I had to run. I had to save my life. And now I went back intentionally to my country to be able to help, to be able to rebuild the country. So both leaving was something that was very, very sad, but returning doesn't have to be, right? So yeah, they are two completely different experiences, and I reflect on both of them.
I want to go back to when you were leaving Syria the first time. Can you describe the days leading up to the day you actually left?
Yeah, it was honestly years. It wasn't just like specific days, but I shared another video on social media where I showed the place where the missile hit in the pool. And for me, this was insane for me to see again. But that was the day that me and my sister decided, okay, we need to risk our lives maybe one more time and live and have dignity the rest of our lives, because that day there was a missile that hit the pool. There was a bomb attack that happened on the football field where someone died, unfortunately, and then the hotel where athletes lived in also was bombed. It felt like a scene from a movie. We got in the car with my mom, and like the missiles were hitting like behind, and I would turn and I would see the glass, like I would see from the glass of the car that like the missiles are hitting, and to me I cannot acknowledge that still in my brain, to be honest. And then my sister and I think we were young and naive and brave enough to say, hey, we can do this. Like we can take this trip. And we weren't the only ones. Millions of refugees did that.
And you were saying you were young and naive. If that had happened 10 years later, now at this age, what would you do? What would you have done differently?
I'd be way more terrified. I would 100% trust myself and my sister to do it again. And I feel like my father raised us to be fighters. My mom taught us that education is very important. So we were raised by tough parents, and we were taught not to give up. And I think, I don't know what the outcome of the journey would have been, but I know that I would have fought until the last breath.
And going back to your recent visit, being away for 10 years, I'm sure there's so much that you missed. What were some of the things that you did, some places that you went to see, any people that you went to see that you haven't seen in 10 years?
It was very overwhelming for me, because the reason why I went back, it was a mission with UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, and Syria's refugee crisis or displacement crisis is the #1 in the world. It's really sad. It's 30 million people were displaced within and outside of Syria. 7 million still are displaced, and 81% go back to their destroyed homes, including myself. So for me, I have a plan B, right? I have a home in Germany. I established a new life, but other people don't. So it is my duty and my responsibility to go back as a Goodwill Ambassador. And we went to multiple cities in Syria. We met with families. We saw projects that UNHCR are running on the ground. It was incredibly helpful for me to see that even in the destruction, I met a young girl that came, and her smile was bigger than all of us combined, right? And I was like, for these children, I want to do my best. And then I also saw my grandma. After 10 years, I saw my friends. I saw the pool. For me, the pool is more home than home. And for me, just to be able to sit and just like listen to the quietness and just the birds, as cheesy as that sounds, it gave me so much peace. But I'm not gonna also make it sound like it was only positive, because when I came back now, I've been struggling for like a few days, like with traumas resurfacing. How can I help my people? How can I move forward? I also saw the destruction to the point where I'm like, how can we recover from this? But I have so much hope that we will, and I have so much hope that people like me, UNHCR, so many organizations will rebuild the country.
We'll talk about your humanitarian work in just a bit, but still on your Syria trip, you mentioned your grandma. You didn't see her for 10 years.
Yep.
How was that reunion?
It was amazing. So my mother did not tell anyone that we're going back, and I told her maybe we should tell grandma. And then she was like, no, I want to surprise her. So I think she was in a shock. It took her a while to really fully believe that we were there, and it was she's definitely older, so it was amazing that we got to see her, and the look on my mother's face, seeing her mother after 10 years, was definitely priceless.
Yeah, of course. Another big part of your story is the pool. You mentioned that earlier, and also it was probably one of the most dramatic scenes in the film and in your life, in real life. So the missile landed in the water while you were in the water, and you're saying that pool is where your journey began as a swimmer. Describe how it felt being back where it all started for you.
Yeah, it is really emotional because a lot of people ask about this specific missile scene, and this happened every day. It happened in the pool, it happened in my school, it happened on the streets, it happened where I live. I would see people protesting, and then someone would get shot, and then they would carry the body and protest again. So for me, it's just, it was really important to share what was happening with millions of Syrians. It was never about me telling my own story only. Me and my sister understood the responsibility of this is the story of millions of refugees around the world, not just Syrians as well. So when the missile hit the pool, in reality, I was training, and everyone ran outside of the pool, and we all went to the changing rooms, and then we took our stuff, and then we went to the gym, because the gym had a downstairs room where we all stayed. We waited for our parents to come. And then I still remember when I got to the car, to my mom, she was shouting because she was like, "Are you okay?" And because I was in a shock, I couldn't answer. Because when I was walking outside of the pool, it wasn't only one missile, it was multiple attacks. Why? Because every sports complex in Syria was a military base. So we were targeted all the time. Not athletes, but there was so many things that were going on that we didn't understand. So when I got to the car, before like 2 minutes of getting to the car, there was an explosion in the hotel. So all the glass flew, and I was like in a shock. I got to the car, my mom was like literally shouting, and I was like, so this is something that happened every day, unfortunately.
Yeah. And looking back at that, if there was never a civil war, and you never experienced all that trauma and that experience, how different would your life be now?
Oh my gosh, yeah, this is a very interesting question, but I don't think I can answer that one, to be honest, because it happened, and I learned from it, and I'm grateful for it. And if I stayed in Syria, I would have still had the same dream of going to the Olympic Games. I would have fought for it every day, but I don't think I would have learned as much as I learned now. Mm-hmm. I would have not been able to understand that I have a bigger role in life than just sport. And I am definitely deeply grateful for every step of the way, for meeting the refugees that I'm meeting, for being able to tell not just my story, but the stories of millions of refugees around the world. So, you know, I believe there's a universal plan for me, and I'm happy that I get to learn about who I am and what can I do in the world, and that I can do better and I can help people.
You mentioned your visit to Syria was actually part of a UN mission.
Yeah.
You've done incredible humanitarian work since becoming the youngest UNHCR ambassador Goodwill ambassador in 2017. What has that experience over the years meant for you, especially now after having returned, to help rebuild your country and help your own people?
Yeah, to me, UNHCR and everyone that works in it are silent heroes, because you don't get to see everything they are doing on the ground. But I was very surprised in a positive way with everything that they're doing in Syria, because it is a very difficult country in the way of like the sanctions. How can we help with the sanctions? You know, still there are very, very heavy sanctions on Syria right now. And UNHCR is doing everything in their power on the ground to tell people that like 370,000 people went back to Syria right now, as example. But they went back to their destroyed homes. And they don't have access to food. They don't have access to clean water, to medical attention. They don't have the basic human rights. And UNHCR is there to make sure that these refugees or these returnee families are, you know, taken care of. And when I went to like a few of like the community centers, and I saw the kids, and I saw what they were doing. I also had like a circle where I talked to women because they come in for therapy, as example. And one of the women told me my dream is like to continue my education so I can come back and be a therapist in the community center. And to me, this is incredible because you're learning how to. They're already teaching refugees how to give back already, you know, with the very little that they have. So for me, the work that I do with UNHCR and being an advocate is the most important job in my life because I understand how important this is and I understand how important my voice is. Because if a girl saw me in the camp or saw me in Syria now and she was 6 years old and said, Yusra could, so can I. That's everything I want in life.
And you did meet one of those girls. You posted her video on Instagram, the one in the peacoat.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that encounter.
It makes me both happy and sad. Her home is destroyed. As you can see in the video, like there are literally holes in the walls, and then like they live in the second floor. So one thing that really concerned me is that like when they're looking out of the window, they're kids, and let's say like she's this tall and then the wall is like this tall. So this is already a concern. There is no safety. The windows are like still being built right now because like UNHCR is supporting them. So for me, I was so sad walking in, and then she came in and she was wearing her Eid clothes. And I was like, what are you wearing? And then she was like, this is my Eid outfit. And I was like, this is life. This is what I learned from refugees, that no matter how dark these times are, there's always light. There's always positivity, and this is my story. When there was no hope for me, there was sport, and there was something that's keeping me going. And now what keeps me going is people like Khulud. Because she came in, she gave me the biggest smile, you know, until the moment I left. We had a conversation. She came and told me, your nails are pretty. And she like asked me questions about my life. I talked to her and her brother and sister. So in general, these are the stories and these are the people that give me motivation to do the work that I do. And I hope that I can go back and help her and help all the young children, you know, whether they're orphans or not. I hope I can give back.
And I think that's the thing about kids, right? They're so innocent and they don't really know what's really happening.
Yeah.
So something so little as a coat or your nail colors just made, you know, caught their attention, made them happy.
Absolutely,
yeah. So in addition to your work with the UN, you actually, just over a year ago, you launched your own Yusra Mardini Foundation. Tell us more about that and why it's important to you to support refugees of all backgrounds, not just Syrians, because that is part of the mission, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So after participating with the Refugee Olympic team in 2016 for the first time, you know, the team happened for the first time. So it was something very new. I was like, I don't know if I want to be called a refugee, I'm going home. So for me, I didn't understand the magnitude of everything going on. I didn't understand what could this team mean. So when I decided to be a part of the team and I went to the Olympics, I realized that we gave hope to the whole wide world. And I was like, oh, wait, hold on. This is not only about me anymore. This is about the kids in the camps. This is about the mothers. This is about the teachers, the architect. This is about me spreading a message of hope and this team spreading a message of hope. So I started receiving messages from young athletes, from you know, grandmas, from people. And then when the swimmers was released, I told my team it's time. I was like, it's time to launch this foundation. And then they were like, are we ready? And I was like, we need to launch the foundation. It is time. So when we launched the foundation, we decided to, I co-founded with my coach, the one that trained me for the Olympics, and we worked together on it, and I have incredible support from UNHCR as well. So the projects that we focus on is giving access to education and sports to refugees worldwide, because my father advocated for sports in my life, and my mom advocated for education, and both are so powerful. And I want to give them the opportunity to dream. You know, I want to give them the opportunity to be able to say, I want to become a doctor. I'm like, okay, how can we do it? How can we help you? So we have, we started with sports projects. We started with a few projects on Lesbos, as example. I also returned after 9 years last year, and I swam in the ocean where where it all happened, but for a good cause. It's called Swim for Good. And you swim as a relay with refugees, volunteers, whoever wants to do it. And the distance is 10 to 12 kilometers to honor the journey that refugees go through to arrive to safety. And many don't. So that was really important for me. And then there are projects that we did in France. There's a project of a resettlement project we're working on with the International Olympic Committee and a university in Canada where athletes get to study and work towards getting an asylum in Canada. So yeah, it is all very new. I'm learning step by step, but I think it's the best thing I've ever done.
And how do you hope to expand that foundation?
I hope to expand that foundation specifically this year in helping my country. As I mentioned earlier, it is still the biggest displacement crisis in the world, and I think there's a lot of work to be done. And for me, my dream for this year is to be able to build schools, to be able to build hospitals, to be able to help my people heal and understand that we can all work together towards a better future. But that's basically what I want for this year. In general, my dream is to be able to help every refugee around the world, even if it sounds crazy.
You can do as much as you can, I think, and it makes a difference for, even if it's one person, it makes a huge difference. So from everything that you've seen, everything that you've experienced, and we can't not mention that incredible journey that you took from Syria to Turkey and then swimming in the sea to make it to Greece. Do you think people actually understand what it means to be a refugee without having experienced it?
It depends. It depends on the person you are. It has nothing to do with a country. It has nothing to do with where you're from. I think the education about who is a refugee, why are they refugees, where are they coming from, there's a lack around the world. I think we need to educate our children who are refugees, why do they leave their homes. I mean, so many Syrian refugees are already returning home, right? And the reason they left is because they lost their homes. They lost their parents. It wasn't safe enough for them. They were thinking about their future. So for me, it's really important to educate people about what a refugee is. I did not turn into a swimmer when I arrived in Germany, right? I had the dream since I was in Syria. I was a swimmer. The doctors that left Syria, forcibly because of the conflict, because of everything that happened, they arrived in Germany and continued doing what they love, which is, being a doctor. So for me, it's, I never judge. And I never want to judge someone that's judging refugees. I want to be someone that can explain that to them and say, hey, let's have a conversation. You love our food, right? Like, you love Syrian food, you love Lebanese food, you love Middle Eastern cuisine, so give us a chance as well, right? When I got to Germany, it wasn't easy for me neither. I was like, it's cold, I don't know if I love the language, but slowly when I gave it a chance, I realized that Germany is an incredible place, and it hosted me, and I call it my second home now, right? So I think it's about being open-minded and learning who refugees are and why they leave their country.
And how much do you think social media plays a role in explaining this, this idea of refugees and what it actually means?
The most powerful tool right now, in my opinion. I think social media can. Everything that our generation or even the younger generation is seeing on social media is incredible. It's a tool of journalism, in my opinion. It's a way of bringing the truth out, and it's a way where you can educate yourself about a lot of things, but also it can be very misleading. Sometimes I saw stories about myself. I was like, wow, who is she? Like, I don't, that's not my story. So you have to be very, very careful who you're following, who are you getting your information from. But in my opinion, social media is a very powerful tool. Look at the video I just posted about my home. And I posted it because I understood the magnitude of why I need to do that. And because a lot of people can't, and I can. And my voice is heard, so I had to.
And you also showed another side of Syria, you know, driving through the streets, the people. Tell us more about that part of Syria that's still, you know, alive and moving.
It's a beautiful, beautiful country. A lot of people have the wrong idea about Syria, and I say it's one of, you know, the oldest countries in the world. The oldest capital is in Syria. The culture and the history is so rich. I hope people get to, you know, educate themselves more about it. Listen, it's not perfect, and it needs a lot of help right now. And it needs, like the streets, you can tell they're very old. They need everything needs renovation. Even like when you're driving, the ways are not, like they're not fixed. And but it's just like, we love it so much. We're so proud of where we come from, and leaving as a refugee even makes you miss it more, because it's also the people. When you go back, you're like seeing your grandma, her apartment is the same, you're like going to the same place, and you're like, oh, this is a new restaurant. It wasn't there when I was there. But also, like, I was passing through places in the car, and I was like, oh my God, this is the corner, and this is that, and this is that. And the driver was like, wow, you remember a lot. And I was like, I love my country. So it's a beautiful country, and it's a very rich of culture country. So for me, I really, really hope that we can come together as one nation and build it again.
Hopefully one day. Just to wrap up, just last question. Do you plan to return to Syria one day permanently, or is Germany a new home?
Syria is my home, and Germany is my new home. You can have multiple homes, I believe. And for me, I cannot tell you like what the plan is 100%, but what I know is that I have two homes. I have people that I care about in Germany. I have people that I care about in Syria. So for me, that would be a dream to go back and live in Syria, but I need to be realistic. The country needs a lot of help. More than 90% of the population needs humanitarian aid. So my role right now is thinking of people before thinking of myself. But I would love to. I would love to go back and, you know, open a swimming academy. I would love to go back and be someone that rebuilds schools, as I mentioned, someone that is like a force for this country. But I have no idea what the future holds. But I think that's the situation of many, many Syrians, not just me. But what I can tell you is that we love our country very, very, very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Yusra. I really enjoyed that conversation. And I look forward to what else you're going to do with your foundation and the work that you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And to my viewers and the audience, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. This was just one story of many people who have left their countries, or were forced to leave their countries to make a future for themselves, and now give back to their people. Thank you, and see you next time.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
Welcome to the dressing room with our Arabiya News. Bridgie, we're back. We were just talking about your, what was we saying?
Call up.
First call up.
Sven.
With Sven, and you thought it was a wind-up.
Yeah, I didn't actually realise until I went into the club the next day, and they had obviously said, yeah, you've got a...
So you absolutely custard pied him?
It wasn't really custard pies, you know, when you're thinking, this ain't...
Can't be real.
It's a wind-up. Oh, yeah, all right.
Weren't you playing well?
So then I was... What?
Yeah, but like, it's not like
you're playing well.
See, this is where his brain ain't working. Like, if you're a plumber,
brain ain't working.
If you're a plumber or an electrician, and Sven calls you saying you called up, like, it could be a wind-up. Yeah. You're left back for Southampton.
I know, playing well.
Could be true, and you played for England.
It was one of them that I kind of like. I was like, oh yeah, all right.
Could be one of the lads.
Has it happened before? Has it happened before? A wind-up on a wind-up. Has it happened?
No, it's not happened before. So I didn't like custard him. I was like, yeah, what? Yeah, kind of whatever, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, both. Both.
And it wasn't until I went in, they go, "Oh, you've got a call." I was like,
"Oh
my God."
Oh, I could have been a bit more
It was
forthcoming.
actually him. I was like, "Oh no."
Could have been more forthcoming.
I could have sounded a bit happier. I'd been, "Oh yeah, buzzing to come along." Yeah. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like a complete custard.
This guy's so
you don't really. It wasn't really.
I can't even remember.
Just to let people know, like, I think your first call up, the manager calls you.
Oh.
And then after that, you get just a text whether you're in from Michelle.
Yeah,
Michelle.
Oh, Mish.
And she was like the
lovely girl.
Lovely
woman.
Secretary. And she looked at, organised everything, all the travel and everything. Was
How did she do all of that? Like,
mate, her
everyone
and the team,
tickets. Do you remember
Anne
she got
Romilly,
bombarded
Joe
for
Budd.
tickets?
Yeah. And she was like, they basically were the mums of the squad. So the people listening, like, you'll go there and like your base camp there, and there's an office, and anything you need, whether
Go to the office.
you go to the office. What do you need? Tickets. You need something. Car park places.
I just used to sit in the office and just talk to Mish.
Cup of tea. Yeah, I'd go in. I was going in for a cup of tea. Just like it was that nice energy. But I remember I had the same phone call from Sven, but I must have been thinking I've got half a chance. Like, so I was thinking, so he's called me and I was like, oh, thanks. Like I was genuinely buzzing, and I celebrated by going for a McDonald's in Romford Town Centre. He's like, what'd you do? I think we had a game the next, like, you know what I mean? I was like, I went and I was like sitting there, and it's surreal because I look back and go back to my Gaza moment in 1990 when I was 1990. So this is 12 years later, and I've been called up to the England squad, and think, wow, I'm going to be doing that, going to the World Cup with England. And I thought, what? And I just went and just sitting there having a quarter pounder or something. And but we both went to Japan, didn't we? When we was young. You played quite a bit there, didn't you? You come on a few times.
I played quite a bit.
You did not
few minutes.
For him,
few minutes.
Obviously, judging by the way he said it, it was way too much.
No. You know what? I'll come on.
You played.
I know. I did come on. No, I came on.
I only come on for a little bit. We was 19 and 20, weren't we?
I know, like, obviously I would have loved to have played loads more, but obviously Ash was just brilliant, and every time he was never injured. And I come on against Argentina where we won 1-0 right near the end. So I was like buzzing to get on the pitch, like, you're buzzing to go, buzzing to have actually got on the pitch. But you know what it's like when you're a footballer, you want to play all the time.
Yeah.
But that's not that time did you?
No, that was 2006.
What, when you scored that volley? Yeah.
What?
There's a goal that just popped up in my head then, because I've actually got my shirt from that game signed by the whole team. Was it against Sweden? Your volley from miles out.
Yeah, I know.
Unbelievable goal that was.
Was that your first game?
No, this was like 2006, was it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking
A
2002.
goal that he scored just popped up in my head. It was against Sweden, mate. Miles out. And I remember because I was in the dugout from behind.
Yeah.
And did you chest it?
Yeah.
He's just chested it, mate. And
bang.
It's gone, like, it's just the dip in it. And like,
what did he say to him afterwards, after that goal? What did he say to him? You must have said something.
Nothing. He was just buzzing, mate. I think everyone was just buzzing, wasn't it?
He was a rock star, man. He had his hair flowing. Like, he took off his top. It was brilliant.
That first tournament we went to, though.
You took off your top.
It was.
Did you take off your top for that goal?
No. Because we got booked. Because that was the era when you used to get booked for it. But that was my forte. I like to get naked.
That was your energy, man.
that first one we went to in Japan was just mad. I remember the kickoff of our first game, and they love a camera over there, don't they?
Yeah.
It was like fireworks, mate. I reckon nearly every person in that crowd was their cameras going off with a flash, and it was like
bang, 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 bang.
Yeah.
It was
mad, wasn't it?
yeah.
Indoor stadiums. Remember that?
Yeah,
There was like air
Is that the first time?
stadiums.
Oh, they had a roof on.
Roof on. Yeah, they didn't mess about.
What, detractable roof?
The Japanese did not mess about. They was on it.
They're forward thinking, didn't they?
Yeah.
We get a lot of ideas from over there. You know what I mean? Even fashion.
Yeah, so we that was our first tournament together.
Yeah.
And we both was young, so we both wasn't playing. I think you played a few times. I might have come on a couple times. I come on once.
A couple of minutes.
Like, so we was there. So we was. I mean,
what did you remember about it? What stuck out?
What stuck out for me?
you?
I got like probably
like the players, and, like the older players.
I have three memories that really stick out from the tournament. Well, the one I already mentioned.
Yeah.
The other one was actually you. and it was a Scholesy when he smashed you in training.
Yeah.
Because I remember I think you had twisted Keown up a few times, and you were doing loads of tricks. I think Scholesy's head had just gone with you because you were just doing all sorts and going round people, and he'd come along and just clattered you.
Yeah.
And it stuck out for me, and I just thought it was harsh.
Yeah.
It was harsh, but I loved the way you handled it. You just got up and carried on doing it. just do what Joe Cole does.
That's what he does. Never changed him.
Do you know what Sven said to me before the Brazil game? Wasn't starting right, but you always thinking I might get on, and we're preparing. And I had to be Brazil. It was like we had to play the shape as Brazil. You must have been playing as Brazil with me against the first team. And he went to me, just go and be Ronaldinho. He said, like, I want you to, because he said, like, just go, just like, be unpredictable. Right, that's my remit, then.
I'll be Ronaldinho.
So, like, it might have been that set, and I'm just like, going, right. So I'm just trying to be like, I'm just like, and it felt like, like, I just remember really enjoying myself.
Okay, because training, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, and then,
flip flaps and all that.
It was all things were coming out. You know what I mean? I was like, it was brilliant. But I remember playing against. I remember the Argentina game being really naughty because the Beckham incident in '98 with Simeone.
Yeah.
And just a little bit of needle.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember when he got the penalty, the silence in the arena was just because it was like it had like
the silence was deafening.
The silence was deafening, Coley. It was like because it had like there was a story behind it. The Beckham thing and all the stick he got at the last World Cup where the whole country turned on him, and he stood up and I remember looking when he put that penalty in. I thought, mate, fair play to you, because I was like, wow, because the cojones were real.
The cojones were large.
Yes,
domineering.
Yeah, but I personally loved the tournaments because I loved football, and I just like I remember we used to just chill. There was again before computer games, really. We never really video games.
We'd have like a little arcade in the hotel,
table tennis pool. Yeah. I'd watch every game, like, and I was just like, this is brilliant. Like a youth club for kids watching football and getting to play for England.
And your pals as well.
With my mates, I couldn't believe it. It was like you didn't go to a tournament.
I didn't go to a tournament. The tournament I was supposed to have gone to the 2010 World Cup.
What happened?
Got injured. I was having a storm of a season, and there was a few because I was obviously for West Ham at the time, and then I just got injured at the wrong time, geez. Like I was in the squads for 2009, all the way up, going up to 2010. So that season, I was like really kicking on as well, and I've just broken into the England squad. And that 2010 tournament was coming up, and I remember. I think it was the back end of the season before I started to get into I got called up, and then coming to that point, it was January window was coming up, and I already knew that I might have had to leave West Ham as well.
Really?
Yeah, because Arsenal needed a striker at the time. So who was it? Who was the Gramundi? Remember Gramundi? He was like the director of football at the time, I think, over there, or the head of recruitment. And he came to watch me that day. And then I'd gone into a 50-50 with the beast, they call him, goalkeeper, Jensen from Burnley. The goalkeeper is massive.
Okay.
Yeah? So I've gone into a 50-50 with him. And then I already had a bad knee already. Yeah. And then I've gone into it and he kind of snapped my PCL, but I didn't know at the time. And then I just felt something go. And so basically your knee's like that.
Yeah.
That's your joint, goes like that. But when he came into me, he's obviously, it's like they always say it's you get this injury in a car crash.
Yeah.
And then so my knee went back like that.
Yeah.
There's a ligament in there that keeps your knee together, tied together, so it doesn't move. And then I've snapped that, and it's hard to repair. And that's why my knee, if you look at my knee now, everyone...
We can ride a bus for it.
Yeah. Like, I got one straight knee and the other one, well, kind of straight, but the other one's just like a letter D. I've talked about this before, but that's what kind of... And then...
Was that from that incident,
Yeah, from that incident.
See, people don't understand that.
And I was supposed to... That January window, Arsenal were about to put in about, I think it was a £20 million bid in for me. And £20 million was quite big back then.
Big
you know what
money,
I mean?
mate.
And they needed a striker there and then. So he come. I remember I went upstairs. I went into the box, and then he come in and he says, "Oh, how long you gonna be?" And I said, I don't know what I've done yet, so I said, I'll go and get the scan. When I went and got the scan a couple of days later, then they told me what happened, and I was like, same knee. How's my luck? Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's why I kind of had to change my game a little bit as well, because I was flying back then, and I was supposed to go to the World Cup, because I was like the understudy for Emil Heskey, innit?
Yeah. Well, I'd say you was pushing him.
Yeah, I was pushing him at that time.
Emil come back from... Emil come back.
Aston Villa, I think.
Yeah, but he come back from the cold. Capello brought him in from the cold. He went and played for England for a while, and you was fine.
You know, I've got the record, an England record.
Go on. I've got to hear this.
You need to hear this. I've got the most amount of appearances for England, 7.
Yeah.
Without starting the game.
No way.
Yeah.
No way.
It's mad, isn't it? It's crazy. How bonkers is that? I've got to put it out there. That's my claim to fame for England.
Yeah.
I've got the most amount. I might have changed by now. I don't think it has.
Without
starting the game for England.
Okay.
Most amount of England appearances.
So you didn't play for England after 2010? After that knee injury?
I did.
You did? You got back in? Yeah.
I got back in. And then, but hit a bit of bad luck as well. In the 2012, we got... 2011-12, we got relegated.
Yeah.
So then I kind of... if I wanted to carry on my England career, I got told that I had to go and play for another Premier League side.
Yeah.
And I said, nah, I could still get in. Because I was thinking Jay Buffroyd had got in playing for Cardiff in the Championship. Who else? Bobby Zamora's around there as well.
Yeah. I remember back in the day, Steve Ball.
Yeah,
Steve Ball, yeah.
That's the old from the playing for England from the champ. So I was thinking, do you know what? I got a chance.
Yeah.
Let me just... And they know that I've been in the system before.
Yeah.
But I think that's what done me, because you had younger players coming through now. Just remember, it's like a recap. It's like a reset button after a World Cup.
Yeah.
Like, who's next? Who's going to be in 4 years going to the Euros?
Yeah.
So I think I was about 25 at the time, 26.
Yeah.
So it was like, I could get to 30 and probably get in.
Yeah.
But I'd have to have a storm of a season, do you know what I mean? And I'm nursing a bad knee. And I didn't have an operation that year when I'd done my knee. I didn't have an operation, and I had the option to do it. I should have done it, because I came back because I want to get back into the team, because England was coming up. I came back too early and I didn't hit my form again, so I couldn't get back. And it was only like last month for me to change the narrative to say, listen, I'm still fit. It was like those days where it's like an old boxer coming out of retirement. So I still got it, but it just doesn't happen. It gets knocked out. That was me getting knocked out, mate. Like it was worth doing though. I could not like say it was a big chance for me to go away with England and do a World Cup.
No, mate, you had to go like. It shows you like things can just change on a night, on a sixpence, innit? You know what I mean? An injury like that. And you don't go to the World Cup.
Was that your first tournament?
My 2002 was my first tournament, and 2010 was my last.
Yeah.
Like you said, that 2006 was my best tournament. I played every game, and they played a big part, and it scored that goal. I mean, people's like the lads wind me up, like because I think as footballers, especially attacking players, West Ham fans will remember you for the Championship. Playoff final goal, right? Think of all the goals you scored, all the great games you played in.
That's what
Like Chelsea fans remember me for the goal against Man United in the league, but most fans, they look at me if they see the street and they go, and it must be in their memory bank. They go, goal against Sweden. Right? So my mates, being the nice people they are, people like some see me in the street, they go, Joe, that goal against Sweden was amazing. And I go, right, thanks, mate. And then my mates go, he's still living off that?
That's the beauty of having good mates from school. Listen,
he's living off that. And you can see the guys go, yeah, but it was a good goal. And they just start battering me back.
It's brilliant. Do you know that? Like, having good friends like that keep you grounded is the best thing in the world.
They keep me grounded, mate. Like, hammer me into the ground.
I think we keep each other grounded because we just hammer each other anyway. And then obviously you got others that are around us that always like have a little bit of banter with us. Can't get ahead of yourselves.
No, you can't.
It keeps you humble, man. It's brilliant. But what you've done in the game, both of you, is unbelievable. And you got to like. Whenever I say to my mates, I'm with Coley and Wayne Bridge, they're like, is it? What they like? I said, don't worry, you'll never meet them.
I've met a few of your mates.
No, I'm joking. No, you've met a few of my mates.
Yeah. So listen, like World Cups for me, I loved them. I loved them. You didn't, Bridge. You was like,
I know I didn't love them.
You
Like, obviously for the Japan, I loved it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's my first one, but then when you're going, you want to play football, don't you? So it's like, do you know what? And it's Ash was just always. He was probably always one of England's best players.
And he was never
at a tournament. He was never injured.
Never injured.
And if he
Got
was
inducted
ever
for Hall of Fame, now, isn't he?
Yeah. And he was,
and rightly so.
Even though it was at the end of the season, he was fit anyway all the time. He could always carry on running. Do you know what I mean? And then even if he had a niggle, you'd always play for little niggles anyway. Just so for me, it was just. You know what I mean? You love being there. You love getting the call up. You obviously want to play. Yeah. So like that was just obviously just the frustration part for the people that don't play. Do you know what I mean? And it's always an attack. It's always the attackers really that. You know, if someone's going to come on, most of the time,
you're never gonna
it was always going to be the attacker. Because if you looked at England's back four, they were, and the centre backs we always had, it would always be them that were going to come on. And if it was never really going to be me or anything, that was just a bit of frustration.
Unless there was an injury,
I loved being with England, but that was just part of it. That long tournaments when you're not playing, aren't they?
You like the cards.
Your chances.
Played a bit of cards. Which again, that was just, to be fair, that was just mainly out of boredom for everyone. I think. Yeah. You know what I mean? There was always not a lot to do. I think it's different now when you watch.
Do you think they do this?
Bridgie. See, like, it's all not talking about boredom, yeah, mate. What was your most boring camp? Like,
do you know what?
The one that you put restrictions on you. Restrictions. Let's talk
because there's not a lot to do, is there? There's never a lot to do once you've trained and you've got a rest. So there's boring parts, and I think that's mainly because you want to play. Maybe it's not as boring for you because you played a lot more. But there's loads of funny and weird things.
What manager made it boring?
Our room.
What manager?
I don't think they made it boring, Geese. It's part and parcel of football, mate. You've got to rest. Do you know what I mean? But when you're not playing, and for instance, I don't know. I remember we're a team. We're going to get in the ice bath together. I don't like ice baths. I haven't played. I don't need to get in one. I'd rather go and train. I remember with Sammy Lee, like having that little thing with him. And in the end, it got to a stage where actually, no. Do you know what? Let them go and train and play football. I'd rather play football than sit in an ice bath that I didn't really need.
Run.
Yeah. Because I always thought with England sometimes when you're not playing, the training I've not done enough.
Yeah.
I like training. I like getting about this. You haven't done enough. I get it for the people that are playing all the time. Just finished the season. They need that rest to recover. But that's why I was.
Yes, it's a tough balance, and it's a tough balance to get. We've got the lads who are playing, the lads who are not playing, and I always think to myself, when fans listen to this and they think you're getting bored, like it's and you're sort of you're what's the word I'm looking for? You're caged. You're caged. Like you want to be out, and I never quite understood.
Caged animal. This guy's a caged animal. You can't cage no goal.
You don't live like that.
You know, probably the best one in terms of
incarcerated.
In the pen.
Outside of the training. And stuff at the hotel was Germany when we had a massive arcade thing. It was massive arcade, wasn't it? Set up. There was tennis courts. There was little bits around that you could do.
And I liked having the girls there and the families there because I popped.
Of course you did.
I can't believe you come out with that. I at least can't believe you just come out with that.
What is it going?
You need some rest and recuperation, Cole.
I think it was good. I loved having my mum and dad come over and everything.
It
was good. It's good to see them.
Normal
Do you know what I mean?
Like when I finished training, when we finished training,
like
I didn't go home and sit down and I went and see my mates. I went to see my mum and dad, or I went out with Carly to do something. So
I love seeing my mum and dad
for me
because they go to every tournament. I loved seeing them.
Yeah, my mum and dad and Bridget's mum and dad used to
got on really well.
Got on really well, and like, mate, that's another thing. The lives that you can give to your parents, they travel.
Make new friends.
My old man in Japan. That is two things that you would never ever would thought the world would see together.
I remember calling my mum, going, I was speaking to her for about 20 minutes, and then I was going, I'll speak to Dad. She went, I don't know where it is. I went, what do you mean? She went, Well, he went out, and I ain't seen him for quite a while now.
Got no interest in his son.
I'm going to go look for him in a minute. And I remember speaking to her now, like, I found him. He's in some local bar, and not one of them can speak English. But they're all just laughing. I was just like, and he's got a notepad out, and he's writing stuff down.
To try and communicate.
Imagine my dad. He was probably a little bit like
he was probably drawing stuff,
great.
like
He was probably all over the shop.
Listen to, I just remember a story for the Argentina game in 2002. Mum's rang me up. She said, he's embarrassing. What's he done? He said, we went back to the hotel after the Argentina game, and there was the Argentinian journalists and fans were in this hotel, and the England parents. And he said, your dad's got drunk, and he's managed somehow to get the whole bar singing "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina."
Oh my God! Unruly.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
unruly.
This is a parent of a player, and my mum's just like, I can't take him nowhere. I'm like, that's all right, mum. Like, they won't notice that. She went, they know he's your dad. Trust me, they know
because he's told everyone.
I'll tell you a story that sticks out from the Japan one. I roomed next to David James.
Yeah.
I was the other side of him. I know what you're
Do
going to
you
say.
remember when he's playing his drum and bass music all night?
Yeah.
All night?
I mean, all night. And I remember waking up in the morning and go, J-Mo, what were you doing last night? He went, I'm trying this sleep deprivation thing to see how I train. So I'm like, what? He went, so he's basically, so what were you doing? He went, well, I was just doing press-ups and sit-ups, listening to drum and bass music all night to keep myself awake. This is how I train.
You know what? He's the leader of the pack with these weirdness of goalkeepers. He's like the leader. He's the one that you'd say, listen, ask J-Mo about stories of being a day in the life of a goalkeeper, because goalkeepers are a different breed to us, outfield players. They're just crazy human beings. And if they're not crazy, they're not good. You know what I mean? They've got some kind of deficiency somewhere.
Iron or zinc or magnesium.
What's going on? Because look, I've got a story about goalkeepers, right? So Marcel Desailly, when I was younger, we was watching training, right? And he goes, Coley, come over here. I was like, yeah. And we was watching the goalkeepers like do their practice.
Yeah.
Like, they're diving, you know what they do? Like, and then the guy's kicking the ball, and it's like, he goes, see those guys over there, yeah? This is a World Cup winner, Marcel Desailly. Those guys over there, what do you notice that's different about them? And I'm like, I don't know, they're brave, maybe, this. He goes, no. He says, if you got a radio, yeah? So if you had a radio, and you keep on throwing the radio on the floor, yeah? When you go to turn the radio on, would it work properly? Mate, and I've gone, you know, I had a light bulb on my head when the thinking light bulb. You're right. That's why they're crazy.
That's some logic there from Marcel. That's
Marcel,
some logic.
What a guy, man. That stuck with me for my whole entire life.
Throwing themselves on the floor.
Bang, bang.
Oh, yeah.
Putting yourselves in the firing line, getting hit on the head, getting hit in the nuts. Like, you're not going to come out normal after that, are you? You could have some kind of deficiency somewhere. Anyway.
That's true. That's
sorry, I don't know where we segued into something else.
That's what we do on this pod.
But yeah, look, for me, like when I look at my time with England, I got regrets, obviously, because I didn't score.
We all have Coley, though.
I didn't score, and I really could.
Things you wish you maybe had done differently.
Yeah. But I'd remember going into sometimes like, and I know it sounds ungrateful, and going into England camps and just not looking forward to it sometimes because Capello was he was good for me, but he wouldn't let us do much, if you understand what I'm saying. And I know he was for us, but I just don't think he trusted us as footballers. Like, if you'd have gone into...
Wise man.
Yeah. He's heard the stories. But we was out in what?
I was right. I should have
locked him in more. Yeah. This guy... So we had Watford over. We was over in Watford, the Grove, weren't we? That was our base at the time. Yeah. So there was no St George's at the time.
Yeah.
And,
I think it was mainly the food thing he brought in, really.
Yeah, the food thing was really bad. Like, there was no condiments. Like, couldn't get a ketchup, couldn't get no vinegar. No, like, didn't want
condiments.
No mayonnaise, man. Come on, man. I need mayonnaise with my chicken.
Do you remember the pressure Tim, the chef, was under, right? Because you'd be like, Tim was like, he'd be standing there proudly behind his food, usually like, wait, because he was obviously good at what he does,
chef.
right?
Very good
And then like the lads like looking, going, Tim, danger,
man. It's dry, man.
Get a sack, man.
Like,
You get a sack.
And then you'd be like, come on, and in the end, like you didn't see him, like the food would be dropped in, be gone.
Yeah, mate. He was
any balsamic or anything,
any juice, any juice. I can't have this orange juice with my fried chicken.
H2O.
But that's the thing about. That was what I didn't look forward to. The food. The food was horrendous back then. I remember when we went away to. I think we were playing Ukraine.
Yeah.
Played Ukraine, and I remember we was in the hotel. It was like Ukraine, you know the hotels over there. It's like old school, isn't it?
Yeah,
proper old school. And I remember coming into the dinner part, the place where we have our dinner, and this is when I knew that Capello was the biggest of bosses.
Yeah.
So, and because I look up to Emil.
Yeah.
But we weren't allowed phones.
Right.
In like at dinner time.
Yeah.
So if he saw a phone, it was a good rule. But it's Emil Heskey, man. Like, this guy's seasoned.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking, this is Emil, what a guy he is. And I just remember he was on his phone at the table, and I think Capello just walks in, sees him, and then he goes to the trays, yeah? You know, like the dishes where the food is, picks one up and goes, Emil, no phones. No, talking to him like a little boy. I was like, oh my God. That's Emil Heskey's talking to you like that. Who the hell am I? I was like that. Phone. I threw it over my shoulder.
I got that about 3 or 4 times.
Did you?
3 or 4 times. Right, but this is where I think like I would have taken this a bit more serious note because like I know we're laughing and joking about us. When we had to put our bodies on the line and do it as good as we could for England, we tried, right? And we gave everything 100%. Like, and no one more than me wanted to win something for England. I would give my, I'd chop off my finger now to if we could have won a World Cup. I promise you. So, but what I would say, what Capello, in fairness to him, I think he come into an era where the press were like, England players were ill-disciplined, not good enough. Bridgie, ill-disciplined. There's like that. We'd got to quarterfinals the last tournament. Went out on penalties, which is it's a fag paper either way, whether you get through, right? And my opinion, what was the thing that we needed to be tactically better? We played 4-4-2. When we come up against a Spain or a Portugal, and they'd be finding them little pockets like rotating patterns of play going through. We didn't have that because that wasn't our culture, and that's changed, which you have to give Gareth Southgate and the FA a lot of credit for because the players now the game's moved on. But I think Capello coming and thought, right, these lads need more discipline. We actually needed, it wasn't discipline, we needed an idea and a style of play which is going to help us in international football.
I think that phone thing was more of us sitting together and being more together, bringing us together and bonding more as a team.
You've heard that story though, Bridgie, that everyone says that we were disjointed as a team. Like Manchester United boys would just be sitting with themselves. Chelsea lads would be sitting with themselves. Liverpool lads would just. I didn't really see it because I used to float around.
You was on the back end of it, Colin.
Yeah, but I didn't see it as intensely as that. What was that story? What's that story about? Is that true?
I got in under Keegan.
Go on.
So sorry, Bridget. I got in under Keegan where you had like the class of '92 who were really good with me, because I was a young player. And I remember Phil Neville and Scholesy and Butty being the first faces I saw as I walked in as a 17-year-old to train with the squad, and they really looked after me. And I'd always be grateful for them. But having said that, they had that Man United thing where they come together. Then there was the Liverpool thing. And then then when Rio went to Man United, he went there. Then the Chelsea thing emerged. And it was just
like, totally different times, those, aren't they?
And so there was that. But the manager and Sven, bless him, I love him, and what a man he was. I think, and his team should have addressed it a bit earlier. Should have made. If I was England manager, I'd have gone right. Rio, Frank, JT, Stevie, come here. Right, listen. We need to stop this now. Listen, you all want to win. You've got to put that aside. And I'd just put it like, what? Don't you like him? Don't you like? Do you know what I mean? Have it out, and I'd be like, not that they didn't like each other because they did. I'm like, You've got to stop it now. So I don't want to see... You are not allowed to sit with you. Come on, boys. Come together. We'll play golf. What do you want to do? Do you want a day off? Yeah. And I would have brought us all together in one way. And I think Gareth broke that up. But when Gareth took over the England squad, the England squad wasn't at its highest point and the players weren't competing for titles.
Yeah.
That was sort of coming down.
Yeah.
But I would have really made that my focus. That should have been the focal point. And Stevie's a great lad. Frank's a great lad. And Cara and all of the boys, you'd have got them all together. And I think if they've been led and driven by the manager and the staff, I think it could have been
better. Us, yeah.
But looking back now with hindsight, which is obviously, I think there was
division in the camp. There was
tiny,
I guess that's down to the manager fixing it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the manager.
Who do you think have been England's best manager? I've obviously always loved Hoddle.
Yeah,
because I had him at Southampton, and I just thought
that's another thing.
He might have
football
been the best.
knowledge. The way he had us playing was amazing. Would he have been best for the team in terms of bringing himself? I don't know.
Probably.
If he would have at England, I don't know.
Did he not do that when he was?
Yeah, no, it was great. I think the way we were playing.
How did he bond the
brilliant.
team? How did he bond the team?
I just didn't know. England's just totally different. They're very different. Being at Southampton, being at England is just totally different. I wasn't with England, so I wouldn't know what it was like.
I could tell because I work with Glenn a lot. We work with him.
Yeah, we're on the team.
And I sit down to him, and he's just the knowledge of football, and he got stitched up. You know, people stitched up by the journalists.
Yeah, 100%. I know that.
He got stitched up by the journalists, the FA. Like, listen, his views outside of football were irrelevant, and they were twisted anyway.
Oh, 100%.
Journalists. When we look back, though, journalists actually did not help our cause of winning anything.
That's one thing I was going to ask.
So much pressure.
Went on to something else. Did you ever really feel the pressure playing from England, thinking about the press when you were playing?
No,
when you actually playing,
but you know why?
Do you think people did though?
100% people.
There were people.
The reason I didn't.
I always wonder. I didn't think there's certain people. I wonder.
Would have been affected by it.
Didn't, but they affected the way they played.
Pressure, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But the reason I didn't was because I was brought up with that pressure to play from a young kid. There was eyes on me playing. So stepping up to England, it actually prepared me for it. It was no different to me from club football. I was going to go and do my thing, and if it was good enough, it was good enough, and it weren't. You know. I've managed that, but 100% players, the press had such an influence on that, and they had that, you know.
They had like
they got England managers sacked.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But
I think that's when it comes back to that mental side of things we talked about.
Yeah.
The other. They're not messed up. The leaks. It was the leaks
last week.
Yeah.
Like in the camp, who was leaking the stories that the press always got a hold of, and then you'll be away with England, and then there'll be something that happened yesterday in the press the next day. Like how. That will divide the team as well. So people don't understand. So when we're talking about Manchester United, Liverpool, whatever, Chelsea and the rivalry, when there's leaks in the camp, you'd think it's one of those lot. And then you're thinking, you know, and then you start sneaking, start talking quietly, and it creates a division within the camp. Mentally, it does. And that, no one ever thinks about that, how much the press influence where it's the mood at the camp.
It's really hard, isn't it? Because, one, it's hard for a manager to get everything right, isn't it? Tactically right, getting the teams together, bonding. Like when you look at England rugby, and obviously I'm not in it, but from what I see, like they're like, we're this. And I think did England need a little bit of that in camp? Is there always a little bit of?
Yeah, there is
something they're missing for that. And then is that a manager bringing that in? That's got to come from the players as well, though. Of like,
yeah, it's got
that togetherness.
It's got to come from the manager.
I'm not saying 100%. They didn't add it because
No.
I'm not in it We're not in it anymore. So with Gareth, I look at it and I think there is a togetherness in it, but I'm not in it, and
I know there definitely is. You can
just think that
you've got social media. You've got social media. Everyone's patting each other on the backs.
I guess we're never going to know, but obviously because we've been in this squad, you're like, there's that little something missing.
There's something, There's something like, and again, like I know it sounds a bit woo-woo, but I think for any team to win a World Cup or European Championship, there needs to be something divine.
Yeah.
Like when Argentina won the World Cup, and I look at their run with Messi, that come from something else. It was written in, like, and you hear stories about how Messi, the manager Scaloni you played with, how he.
I didn't play with him. He came before. He's not got a good name.
Right, okay.
Apparently.
Well, West Ham... It made a mistake. World Cup or no World Cup, West Ham fans ain't going to give the ball to Stevie G.
Yeah, that's it.
But he talked about how he needed to connect the new players with Messi, and Messi's apparently, from what we understand, is a standoffish, like a reluctant leader, if you like. And he made this thing where he brought them together somehow. I can't remember how it was, but they because they are Latin players, they're very sort of they're intuitive and they're passionate, and I think with England we've all I think we need a bit of that.
Proud.
We're proud, but we need a bit more
conservative.
It needs to come from the passion and back to what we was in the 70s, 60s, and
well, that's the drinking days. Drinking culture.
Something in that we just missing with this. Everything else is there, and I think the next England
ingredients.
We're going to get onto it now. The next England squad, they need something that needs a little bit more that passion, spirit. Remember Argentina quickly. The Argentina-Holland game when it went to 2-2, and Argentina were going to lose. They'd already been 2-0 up. They should be through to the semi-finals of the World Cup, and all of a sudden this Dutch team got back to 2-2, and they were in their face and all that. And I think it was Rodrigo de Paul, the midfielders. The game was running away from them. They were going to lose the game. And you shouldn't do this, any young players. The ball broke in front of the Holland box, and he smashed the ball at Louis van Gaal, and the ball smashed into the thing. Started a big, massive brawl. Messi's in there, bang.
Yeah.
And it was a momentum shift in the stadium.
Yeah.
And everything, and the game changed. And then you could see the Argentinian players going, all right,
we'll have this.
I'll bring in the fight now.
Bring it to that level. Yeah. And then they went bang. And then Scaloni.
I remember it. I remember it.
And they won 3-2. Yeah. And then Messi was called someone to the big centre forward. Foul or to give him something. But there's going to be moments like that in the next World Cup where this Thomas Tuchel England team are going to have to find something which is...
Got to ruffle some feathers.
You've
got to do it, because that's the edge. That's the edge that the maybe 10% that you need.
We're too polite. We're too polite now as England. We're apologetic.
We're nice.
We're too apologetic.
What about the dark side of the game?
Do you know, when I brought up the bit about the players worrying about whether it's the press or the fans of not playing... relaxed enough. There's another bit that stands out for me at one of the World Cups. I don't know if you remember this. We're on a coach. We're all sat there in our suits. Very quiet. Not a lot being said. And I can't remember the bus that pulled up.
Cameroon,
and
mate.
Pulled
up. No, mate. Honestly, music playing. They're all dancing down the bus ready. Yeah, let's go have a game of football.
There's something in that.
I just felt like, I don't know. I know everyone's different, but I think we need to just
mellow out.
That's why I love Cole Palmer. I think when he goes and plays, I feel like he plays with no fear.
He lets the game
like
play
he's playing on the park.
Yeah. And that's a
not
there's a
worrying
thing in that.
about anything after what people are thinking. Or
don't care. Say what you want as well.
No one goes out. No one goes out on that field to make a mistake or play a bad pass.
That's exactly what.
Just want to enjoy the game as well.
And I think it can affect, and maybe it did affect a few of the players, and it does still maybe.
Because you care. Do you know what it is? It's because you care.
Yeah.
You care. You don't want to let your country down.
Yeah.
And that's, I know Glenn isn't for everyone because it's very hard to something, but he was very good at that for me.
Yeah.
And visualization and things. And stuff like that.
It's brilliant.
I'd if I was the England manager going into this World Cup, if I was Thomas Tuchel, that would be what I'd be trying to galvanise. I'd be just like, let the boys. I'd want to get to know them as people. I want, because I need to know that, because at one moment Thomas Tuchel's going to have to stand up in front of the team in a difficult moment, and he's going to have to find something. People. There's loads of people that think football's X's and O's, and we're going to do this,
you have the best players in the world.
You have the best players in the world. But you're going to have that relationship, and you let them boys feel like you said, none of them want to go out there and play bad. They all want to go and win the World Cup for England, and that make them feel that, give them the licence to go and play freely at a big tournament.
There's something in sometimes not having to pick the best team. So you could have, the best players.
Yeah.
So now we kind of know who the best players in this country are.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they have to be picked for England.
Yeah.
And you don't have to merge the best players together to win things. Sometimes you need water carriers. Sometimes you need a goal scorer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need someone that can do box to box.
Yeah.
Someone that can just quick.
Yeah.
And if you could get them all in those ingredients, or someone that's really creative.
Yeah.
And if you could get those ingredients together, whether they're the best in their field or not, they don't have to be the best. They've just got to be able to merge together to be the best team.
On that day.
On that
moment.
Not even that moment. in that tournament.
Yeah.
So now when we're talking about the Cameroons coming off the coach, they probably know they got that.
Yeah.
Well, I could depend on him because he's relaxed. He knows I know what he can do. And then you trust that person because you're in the same ship with him, and I know he'll run through a brick wall for me when it's not going bad. I know that's my insurance plan because he'll cover me. You know what I mean? Not start pointing fingers. You didn't do that. Get back. You want that encouragement, but the delivery sometimes has to be better so it doesn't divide the way I think about you as a person. And I said, why does he keep on shouting at me, digging me out all the time? And that needle can always get to the next level, as in you start defying. No, I'm not going to run. No, you do it.
Yeah.
I want you to make a mistake.
Yeah.
This, that, and the other, so you start playing the next game.
The boys on the bench need to feel part of it, but they also need to know that they're standing with their players.
This is what I'm saying. I always say that it's a squad game. Yeah. So the boys on the bench. I always want to say to my managers, if I'm a sporting director of football one day, I'll say, listen, the boys that you pick, the first 11, forget about them. Yeah. See the ones that are not playing. Yeah. Those are the ones you need to keep happy, mate.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones going to prop, and they're the ones going to prop you up when it's going bad, and when you need when your plan A don't work, those boys on the bench are going to make your plan B work. Yeah. So you better make sure that they're happy too. Yeah. So you need a squad that's happy, and whether they're playing or not doesn't matter. They know that I've got a role to play in this team at some stage, and just make them feel appreciated. That's coming from me. That's been on the bench, rode the bench a few times, obviously.
We all have.
So I just need. I'm talking from experience, and those. I'm the type of person. I'm the type of person that was never hating on anyone. I wanted everyone to do well. I never said that striker. I should have been a little bit probably like that a little bit more, but I wanted that striker to go and get a bucket full of goals. Yeah. Go and be the main man because I want to win something with you. I want that memory. Yeah. And I hope this England squad that gets picked now realise that and go and make history and go and be the best they can be.
I think that is a beautiful way to leave it. Man was like a young John Takana there.
I'll take that from you. Hey, don't leave me like that. Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy.
Listen, you said from the heart, and having played with you, I know that is absolutely true. You mean it. Just a quick thought before we go. Looking ahead, lastly, just a quick looking ahead to the World Cup after Tuchel. Wouldn't it be great if we took the podcast on the road for the World Cup?
Oh,
I've just thrown that idea out there. I know the bosses are...
Here he is.
Someone asked the boss.
I'm up for it.
I think I can hear messages being pinged now from the green room.
Ping. What an idea.
What an idea, yeah. So
America, here we come.
We love England. We love it. There's cowboy hats. We've been a lot.
Mate, we'll come to camp and we'll just
arrive for the pod on the back of a horse.
We'll interview the players on site.
To be fair, your legs are all right for running. Okay.
I do the bull riding, mate.
That's true.
I need it more wild.
On that note, thank you for listening to The Dressing Room with Our Arabiya News. See you soon.
From the White House to Gaza, Kyiv to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deep fake and artificial intelligence,
they've got to have a vote and a say.
It's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
my campaign is going very well.
Presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on The Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson, and in today's special programme, we take a look back at some of the best interviews during the last couple of days. Hello and welcome to the programme. We begin in Saudi Arabia, where US negotiators have today been holding talks in the capital, Riyadh, talks aimed at paving the way towards an end to the fighting in Ukraine. Well, on Sunday, the US delegation met with Ukrainian negotiators, and today the US team has been meeting with Russian negotiators. Well, as well as bringing about an end to the war in Ukraine, Washington's aim is also to improve bilateral ties with Moscow. But despite these diplomatic efforts, thousands of kilometers away, the fighting continues, with both Ukraine and Russia accusing each other of launching overnight drone strikes. Let's get more now, and we can speak to Ambassador William B. Taylor, the US Chargé d'Affaires to Ukraine under President Trump, currently distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council, who joins us now from Michigan. Ambassador, great to have you with us. You, of course, also served under Presidents Bush and Obama. I'd like to ask you, first of all, what your assessment is of the Trump administration's efforts to end the war in Ukraine.
So, Tom, I will say that the Trump administration has put a higher priority on ending the war than the previous administration. President Trump, as we remember, has famously said he was going to solve it, he was going to resolve it in 24 hours, which, of course, no one thought that was actually possible. But that did indicate that there's a high priority, sense of urgency to this, which we didn't have before. Previously, we were providing weapons and ammunition and intelligence, but we weren't engaged in bringing the war to an end. And President Trump is. That could be a good thing. He can bring some pressure on certainly President Putin to be able to end this war.
How does he do that? How does he exert pressure on President Putin? Because some might say he'd made a few concessions to President Putin and got none in return.
Some of his people have made some concessions already. You're exactly right, and they've got nothing in return. But President Putin really does want to come in from the cold. President Putin is isolated. He's an indicted war criminal by the International Criminal Court for abducting Ukrainian children. He's got sanctions on him and his economy. His civilian economy is not going well. His civilian economy is fragile, and more sanctions or even more enforcement of existing sanctions can really do bad damage, can do severe damage to the Russian economy. So President Putin wants some things from President Trump. President Trump can use that as leverage to get from President Putin a better deal than President Putin has been talking about. President Putin has been making these outlandish requests, demands, preconditions that are just not going to go anywhere with the Ukrainians or the Europeans or the Americans. So President Trump can bring some pressure.
So you're saying that the sanctions are having the intended effect when they were enacted a couple of years ago. And this, in turn, you're saying can be used as carrots to get the Russians to agree to a deal that's perhaps closer to what the Ukrainians might want out of this. Is that roughly what you're saying?
Yes, I would say carrots or sticks, because as you indicate, the sanctions that have been on for years, and it's Europeans and Americans have these sanctions on, but they've been evaded. Those sanctions have been somewhat effective, and they have hurt the Russian economy as they were designed to do, to make it more difficult for them to be able to fund this war, this illegal war. The sanctions have done that, but they haven't stopped the war. The sanctions haven't stopped the war for a couple of reasons, but one is they haven't been fully enforced. It is possible to make these sanctions tougher, enforced more, or even additional sanctions. So that those could be the sticks. Yes, there are some carrots that if the Russians get out of Ukraine and cooperate with President Trump and President Zelensky, then there could be some sanctions relief.
Ambassador, a couple of clues emerged on the US position from the White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. During the weekend, he gave an interview in which he said that a ceasefire in the Black Sea, a sort of a maritime ceasefire, could be one of the things that comes out of the talks in Riyadh. He also talked about the lines of control. And I'm just wondering whether you think the US would agree to a deal that saw the lines of control frozen where they are now, and whether you think Ukraine would support such a deal.
Tom, the second part of your question is the important one. Would the Ukrainians agree? They are the ones that are going to be negotiating with the Russians. Maybe, yes, through the Americans. Maybe this is a shuttle diplomacy kind of a negotiation with the Ukrainians in one room and the Russians in another. But let's be very clear. It is really a Russia-Ukraine negotiation, the Americans in the middle. But you asked the right question. Would they be willing, or would we be willing, to see the lines frozen? I think the Ukrainians would hate it. The Americans would want to see this war end, or at least this firing, this killing stop in some just and lasting way to get to a just and lasting peace. So it may be for some period of time that these lines, the current lines, could be the ceasefire lines. You mentioned the Black Sea, and they've also talked about, of course, energy ceasefires. Both sides would agree not to fire at each other's energy sophistication system. But then they might talk about Black Sea agreements to allow exports. And then they may get to a ceasefire in the air. And finally, a broad ceasefire, which is what President Trump and President Zelensky agreed on. And President Trump presented to President Putin, and President Putin said no. He didn't want this broad ceasefire. But that's the stage. Energy, Black Sea, air, land, and then finally a full ceasefire, which would then set the stage, Tom, for real negotiations on a settlement, a final settlement.
I just want to pick up on one of the things you were saying there, Ambassador. You were saying, would the Ukrainians accept such a deal? Do you think the Ukrainians can really just turn around and say no to a deal that's presented or brokered on its behalf by the United States? Or do you think they have to accept what Washington puts in front of them?
They don't have to accept it. They do want to be as cooperative as they can with Washington. But they've shown on a couple of occasions that they're willing to say no. You may remember a couple of weeks ago, the Treasury Secretary, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, showed up in Kyiv, Ukraine, and put a draft agreement on minerals, on U.S. Development of rare earths and strategic minerals. He put a draft of this agreement on the table. And President Zelensky basically said, no, I'm going to take a look at this and I'm going to make some suggestions and negotiate. And so they've done that, number one. Number two, they are fighting, Tom, literally for their lives, for their existence, for the existence of Ukraine as a nation. And they're not willing to compromise. They can't compromise on that. So even if the going gets tough in these negotiations, the Ukrainians will continue to fight. They've shown that they can fight for more than 3 years. They've been fighting, I keep track, 1,125 days they've been fighting, and they'll continue on.
There's a perception, and you know, I think quite a lot of people would agree, that President Trump's pretty hard on President Zelensky, whose country you served in and whose country was invaded. The Ukrainians, after all, have played ball. They accepted the 30-day ceasefire deal, which Russia did not. Why do you think President Trump is so hard on the Ukrainian leader? Is it justified, do you think?
So you're right, it's a complicated relationship, but it seems to kind of go up and down. Right now, they seem to be on track, in sync, on the same page, the Americans and the Ukrainians. But yes, there's a history there, undoubtedly, that comes into play. However, going forward, it is very clear that the Ukrainian interest in a just and lasting peace is the same as the interest that the Americans have for a just and lasting peace. It will provide the security to Europe, and it will provide security to the United States. It will provide benefits to Ukrainians, Europeans, and Americans. So I think the interests are what's key, and they are widely shared between Ukrainians and Americans.
Okay, and just lastly, the United States delegation and the Ukrainian delegation held some talks on Sunday. Today, it's obviously more about the US delegation talking to the Russian delegation. We understand there are going to be more talks after those talks between the US and the Ukrainian delegations again. That suggests, doesn't it, that ground has been made, progress has been made, both in the Sunday talks and the Monday talks, for there to be talks happening again. Do you think the signs are looking optimistic?
I think they're looking good. I think it's the right next step. But you're right to point out that these conversations are steps in that direction. These conversations are not senior level. These are not, heads of state or even ministerial level discussions, except that the Ukrainians do have their Minister of Defense there. But the Russian delegation and indeed the American delegation are basically experts, and they are working on the specifics of a ceasefire, starting again with the energy, and then maybe progressing to the Black Sea. But these are step by step. We're not looking for a big breakthrough, but it's a good indication that they're making progress.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Ambassador William B. Taylor, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get more on the talks, and we can speak now to Sergei Markov, who is a former spokesperson for President Putin, who joins us now from Moscow. Mr. Markov, thank you for joining us once again here on Al Arabiya News. We're just hearing from the Russian representative, Grigory Karasin, and I gather you know him quite well. He is, of course, a seasoned Russian diplomat. He says the talks are progressing, quote, creatively. What do you think he means by that?
I know Grigory Karasin personally many years. He is extremely experienced. He was first deputy Russian foreign minister responsible for the post-Soviet countries, including Ukraine. And he knows personally also a lot of members of Ukrainian delegation. When he used a creative negotiation, he meaning that this negotiation go far beyond what expected. It's exactly what means, what usually we understand. It means that the topics for negotiation much more broader than it was expected. And also creativeness positive characteristic. It means this negotiation is going positively from a Russian point of view. Also creative means that American side can make some quite good suggestion from Russian point of view.
You emphasize the fact that Grigory Karasin is extremely experienced. The same can be said of Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. I know he's not taking part this time around, but we're talking about a brand new administration in Washington. And on the one hand, you've got these very experienced Russians and these very inexperienced Americans. Do you think your delegations therefore got the upper hand?
I think that Donald Trump team also very experienced, but not from diplomacy point of view. It's one of the problems that Russian side is very experienced in diplomacy, but diplomacy now is a crisis, everybody understands. And Donald Trump and Witkoff, who is his Trump personal friend and also a big businessman in New York, and they're very experienced in making the deal. They're very experienced in making negotiation about the deal. And as you understand, the businessman in New York, which is very big from business point of view and very competitive area, as businessmen in New York, they're very tough, very strong, very experienced in negotiation.
The Kremlin, meanwhile, Dmitry Peskov saying we're only at the beginning of the whole process. And I'm just wondering how hopeful you are that these talks in Riyadh are going to achieve some sort of a breakthrough on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Nobody knows, but I will tell you my guess. My guess is that probability of the peace deal during this spring sounds like about 25%. And but probability of the making peace deal to the end of this year already something about 65%. So this is my general impression. Now we have in the Riyadh negotiation about 3 levels of the peace. One is sectoral ceasefire, meaning stopping of attacking against energy infrastructure and possibly another kind of infrastructure. It's first level. Second level is full ceasefire, but temporary ceasefire on the 30 days. And generally, third level is general peace deal. I think negotiation is touching the question issue on all these levels. And but of course, Russia wants to make a small step first. Also because Russia side believes that Ukrainian regime and European countries will violate those agreements. So it's better to allow them to violate only small agreement instead of allowing them to violate big agreement.
Before I pick you up on that, there is another element to discussion there in Riyadh. They're talking about a Black Sea maritime ceasefire, which would be significant from the point of view of food exports from Ukraine. Do you think that's likely to be achieved?
You know, I don't want to say. I will tell you the truth. It's just a small trick of the Donald Trump team, because they understand that a temporary ceasefire general is not high probability, but to make a ceasefire on the Black Sea, it's very easily, because Ukrainian exports from Black Sea ports already bigger than before the war had been started. So it's going very well. And also the situation in the Black Sea, it's not so intense from point of view of the fight, because only Russian army has Black Sea fleet. Ukrainian attack has not, but Ukraine has a very strong army of the sea drones, which attacked Russian Black Sea fleet. And as a result, in the Black Sea, there are no military ships, because Russian military ships hide away in the Russian port under the protection, and Ukrainian army has no real big ships. So it's very easily to get the deal, the peace deal in the Black Sea. It could be very good from information point of view for a Donald Trump team. Donald Trump can report, you know, it's great. I made the peace deal for the Black Sea, but it's not so much.
Okay, so you think that's a bit of window dressing there. Moscow, of course, joining those talks in Saudi Arabia, sitting opposite a Trump administration delegation. I just want to ask you how the dynamic has changed the last 2 months in terms of relations between Washington and Moscow now that the Biden administration's gone. How different is it working with this new administration?
Of course, the great difference of this administration compared with previous administration. Previous administration of Joe Biden, in fact, was initiator of this war and main engine of those war. And this Donald Trump administration want to make the peace deal. It's very important. Also, it's very important that you touch that it's not only Ukrainian crisis between Russia and United States. Donald Trump wants to solve another issues. First of all, Donald Trump and his team wants to make the order of the American people, who demand, first of all, to stop possibility of the nuclear war, nuclear catastrophe. It's important direction of negotiation between Russia and the United States. And another issue is recovering of diplomatic relations between Russia and the United States, because under the Biden administration, the number of diplomats decreased almost 30 times. And I know that, for example, American diplomats who wanted to meet with me, they had a lot of difficulties to do this. And same Russian diplomats are not able to meet with members of Congress and senators and so on. This is very important direction. And if you look at the Donald Trump narratives toward this Ukrainian crisis, I think it's a narrative of the New York developing businessman. He understands that Ukrainian war is business which is not profitable, and it's the business which has absolutely no chance to be profitable. That's why to stop it and to sell this business to somebody, to Europeans or to Russians or to Ukrainians.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Sergei Markov, former spokesperson for President Putin. Thank you very much for your time. Well, let's get more now, and we can speak to Bob McEwen, former Republican congressman who served as a member of the US delegation to the European Parliament. He joins us now from Miami. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us here at Al Arabiya News. Seems like there have been no major breakthroughs at those talks in Riyadh, but some progress. What are you seeing? What stands out for you?
Well, this is upsetting to many of the diplomats because they like to talk, but when it comes down to actually making a decision, they really like to put that off for a decade or two. And so to have a businessman from New York that says, let's do this, okay, if we can't do everything, let's do these two things, let's move forward on these three or four, that goes against the grain of a comprehensive agreement. Remember, that's what was the decision as to whether or not to have the embassy in Jerusalem. That couldn't be decided for over 50 years because we needed a comprehensive agreement. And Donald Trump said, no, we can do this, let's just do these things. And so what we're seeing is piece by piece, he's putting together an agreement that hopefully will bring an end to a war. And every foreign ministry in the entire EU and every Secretary of State in both Canada and the United collectively, they never even bothered in 3.5 years to pick up the phone and talk to Putin. So we can see that there'll be some frustrations along the line, but I call this progress.
Okay, I mean, a few bits of information have sort of been drip-fed out of those talks in Riyadh. We understand that sanctions targeting Russian agriculture are now going to be lifted by the United States. It seems that there's going to be a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, although that's not 100% set in stone yet. I mean, it does sound, doesn't it, from that that's yet more concessions to the Russian side. What's Ukraine getting in return? Anything?
Well, one of the things that they can get in return is our desire is to bring peace and survival. And at the rate that we're going, the idea, this is like a fourth grade agreement, as much as it takes for as long as it takes. That is not a strategy for a war. That is a strategy for the annihilation of people. And of course, we all understand and believe that Putin would have never done this had he not been assured 3 different times when he put 30,000, 60,000, and 90,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. And finally, when asked what the United States response would be, Mr. Biden said, well, it depends on the extent of the excursion. And the understanding was that Russia would be in Kiev in 3 days and it would all be over. That's what preempted this situation. Well, now the United States is committed to having a long-term permanent relationship and making it abundantly clear to Russia that Ukraine is going to survive. Now, in the process of having gone through this, there's going to be a compromise on certain parts of territory. And to think that we can just press a button and go back to the way it was before the Democrats took control in 2021, that probably isn't going to happen. There'll be disappointments on both sides, not the least of which will be the Russians. But it's essential for all of us to begin to get all of us working together rather than this triad of Russia, China, and Iran that is a threat to the Middle East and a threat to Europe and the United States.
Yeah, I mean, you say ending the war at the touch of a button. I mean, it was supposed to be at the touch of a few buttons and then a telephone call afterwards that was supposed to draw a line under this, and that clearly hasn't happened. Do you think President Trump is likely to be a little bit disappointed, given, as you say, that his expectations were here and what diplomats can deliver is down here?
No, Tom. What he thinks and what he sells are not necessarily completely congruous. He knew it was going to be tough, but he needed to convince people that it could be done. And as I mentioned to you, all of the striped pants, pink shirt bedwetters couldn't collectively come up with a solution to this thing. And so he said, piece of cake, we can do it, which of course they ridiculed. But in the process of it, he picked up the phone and Putin says, yeah, I want out of this. And they're systematically walking through it. And I think that this definitely isn't going to last another year, whereas had he not been involved, it could last another decade.
I mean, the Trump administration is seen as being a lot more sympathetic to Russia than the previous administration. Do you think that's helping in terms of bringing about a resolution to this? And if so, I mean, how's it bearing fruit?
Well, that's a powerful and insightful and important question. I served on the Intelligence Committee, and one of the things that I learned is that the subterranean sub-state is able to create a scenario that they wish to see created. That is, that these people who think that they're reporters, now many of them are just straight out operatives, but many of these, quote, reporters, unquote, have their experts, the people that they go to for insights at the EU, in Brussels or in London or wherever. And they say, well, you know, what you need to understand that behind the scenes, this is what's going on. And that is a scenario that is coordinated among the intelligence services. Now, the truth of the matter is, if you take any single point, and you will discover that the reason that Putin didn't move an inch under Donald Trump was because at every point that he started to, Trump thumped him repeatedly, not the least of which was the the pipeline, in which he canceled the pipeline. Well, that cut off his finances. As well as, and so that he couldn't go to war. Once Biden came in, and once Germany started paying them over $100 million, the EU paid $130 million a month for energy. That finances his war against Ukraine. So in all of these things, we can go on and on with other examples. That in the process, the friendship, the ease with which Putin has operated under the Democrats is significantly more open than it was under than it was under Trump. Trump was very forceful against Putin. Putin knows it and he respects it. And so this idea that somehow or another he's a Putin puppet is belied by any single reference, economic, military, or political.
I mean, they're not just talking about Ukraine, are they, there in Saudi Arabia? I mean, the talks are now finished, but we understand, according to the Russian delegation, one of the key figures there, a seasoned diplomat by the name of Grigory Karasin, said, quote, "We're talking about everything. It was an intense dialogue, not easy, but very useful for us and the Americans. Lots of problems were discussed." I mean, aside from Ukraine, I mean, what sorts of issues do you think they're trying to sort of fix over those discussions?
Well, everyone who is outside this axis, Russia, China, Iran, is in jeopardy when that alliance. And what has happened over the last 4 years is that the Russians and the Chinese have always been at odds for 300 years. That relationship has been forced more closely than it's ever been in this millennia. And you and I have watched it, and it was forced because of errors made by the United States and the European Union. Now, what Donald Trump is doing is saying, because Russia, your future is not with China. Your future is with Europe and the West. And by doing that, number one, and then cutting off the finances to Iran again, which is the source of financing the Houthis, the Hezbollah, the Hamas, and others. By doing those two things, he is putting things back to the way it was before the Democrats took power in 21. That is to break up that triad that's a threat to all of us. So at Riyadh, and I really appreciate what the Saudis have done here across the board in many instances. And hosting this, I think we're going to see tremendous progress. And if we can stop the killing, that has to be done. Trump ain't going to do anything with anybody in Russia until the shooting stops. And once you stop the shooting, then we can begin to have some rapprochement so that Russia can see its future is with with Europe and not with China, number one. And then number two is never in the history of the United States of America, never in the history of the United States of America has an American ship been attacked on the high seas with impunity. Never once. until Joe Biden became president, and it happened 170 times by the Houthis in the Red Sea, such that the maintains of the shipping lanes around the world that are maintained by America since World War II, people had to go around Africa to avoid it. Now that has stopped, that will stop over the next couple of weeks as well. The world is going to get back into order because of Donald Trump. And you're going to see the sub-state, the people that are leaking the stories to these reporters, and they're going to say all manner of evil about him because war and chaos is what they prefer to peace and prosperity. And that's the competition.
I mean, the United States, in terms of levers when it comes to negotiations about Ukraine or indeed any other matter with Russia, I mean, one key lever they've got are the sanctions that have clearly inflicted major harm on the Russian economy. Some pretty weak growth figures out of Russia were announced only in the last couple of days. But if any of those sanctions are pulled back or rescinded by the Americans, aren't they taking away one of their own very important trump cards that should perhaps be kept up their sleeves for use at a much later stage? What are your thoughts?
That's an insightful question, and I think it would be a general table conversation. But if one wants to sit back and do not bet against Donald Trump, he's not 1/10 as stupid as people think that he is. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's 18 steps ahead of everybody. And in the end, they say, lo and behold, that's what they did with Reagan. He was lucky. Well, you're going to see he knows how to negotiate, and he's going to negotiate for peace, which is a very great frustration to the arms dealers around the globe and to the professional diplomats who, when there's peace, they don't have anything to do. So he's going to arouse their concern, but he's also going to bring peace and prosperity in the process. You just watch.
Yeah, that's if the Russians are interested in that idea as well. And just, you know, looking at how things are on the battlefield right now, I mean, the Russians are pretty firmly entrenched in 5 regions of Ukraine. They've managed to more or less expel the vast majority of Ukrainian military positions inside Kursk, where they've been since the month of August. I mean, what interest is there for the Russians after having lost, you know, somewhere in the region of, we are told, 95,000 Russian lives? What would be the interest in stopping the fighting right now when it seems they've got the upper hand?
Well, I think that the numbers of losses are actually much greater than that. I think that the Putin government is much more vulnerable than many would appear. His friends, with all of their yachts parked around the Mediterranean, cannot get gasoline because of the sanctions, and there's frustration building. And I believe that the death count has been significantly higher. And of course, when the North Koreans were fighting, the North Korean soldiers that they captured, they said, we thought we were supposed to fight South Koreans. That's why we were sent here to fight South Korea. So the whole thing is very, it's not happy land, I'll tell you that. And I think he's looking for a way out. And I think Donald Trump is trying to arrange it. And also what he has to do then also is to cut off, as I said, he has to remove the success of the income that comes from Germany and from the EU on the one side. And of course, I don't think we would have ever been here had the United States either prevented the war to start or acted promptly in the first 6 or 8 months of the war. It was the piddling around that these people have done that have us to the point that you're exactly right. They've made a significant investment. Why did they want to give up that land for nothing? That's going to be complicated. It's much harder. Every day that's gone by, it's been harder. Every year that's gone by, it's gotten harder and harder and harder. There will be disappointment on the Ukrainian side, but the United States, in an agreement, not in a military agreement, but an economic agreement to protect their interests, are working out something with the Ukrainian government that will be hopefully stable and secure for the years ahead. That's what they want. And then as for Russia, the idea that they can continue in this war footing with nothing else to look forward to except dependent upon China is not a great future for Mr. Putin.
And just lastly, in terms of what's been happening at the negotiating table, we've talked mostly about what's been discussed between the Americans and the Russians. But today there was a second round of talks between the Ukrainians and the Americans. They obviously held a round of talks on Sunday as well, much longer talks. Today's talks were quite brief, we're told. Is there anything we should read into that? And do you think they have managed to sort of patch things up and mend fences?
Oh, there's no question. If you read The Art of the Deal, there's a whole chapter on there comes a time when you got to get up and walk out. And pardon me. And Mr. Zelensky met with the Democrats, and they got him all ginned up that he could lecture Trump. And boy, that was a real mistake on his part. And so Mr. Trump showed him to the door and said, "That'll be fine. You come back when you're ready to talk." And we're only a matter of hours in which he called back and said, "Yes, I'm willing to talk." So, well, the deal that we were going to sign, let's get starting with that again. And so they begin to walk through it. So in the length of the messages there, Trump is the intermediary. And here's what, Tom, we always have to be cautious about. Regardless of what the agreement is, I can tell you, I don't know when it is, if it'll be in 3 weeks or 3 months, whenever it is, the professional striped pants, pink shirt diplomats are going to just be very, very dismissive of it because they didn't do it. And the fact that a businessman could get together with a couple and knows power. He knows people that are Trump, Putin. There are 4 things that make for a strong country: economic, military, political, and leadership. And the military in Russia is significantly weaker than it was, except for the nuclear power. Politically, there's not the level of support. Economically, as you know, it has a GDP the size of New York State, but it has strong leadership. That's why Putin is able to do his thing. So when you have somebody that comes across the table who has all the 4 necessary ingredients, such as the United States with proper leadership, and we haven't had proper leadership, that's why we're in this mess. But now that we have somebody that's with proper leadership, he's going to work this thing out, and I think it's going to be much, much, much better for Ukraine. Ukraine has been under an oligarchy of corruption, often coordinated out of Moscow, by the way, the last several leaders. And Zelensky was a favorite of theirs, and they thought he could just walk in and take it, and he would take his airplane and go to the Mediterranean. That would be the end of it. But the people of Ukraine, not the government, the people of Ukraine said, "No, sir, we're not giving up our land. We're not going to be Russians again." And they fought. And that upset the entire equation that the professional diplomats, primarily the Biden administration, they never thought that was going to happen. Then they didn't have any strategy to respond to it. And that's been the 3 years of death and destruction that we've encountered. That's what makes Putin that's what makes Trump so offended. He knows it didn't have to happen. And when it did happen, you didn't know what to do about it. And so now he's got to come in and mop it up. And there will be sadness and drawing the lines and doing the things, as you mentioned with the Black Sea. There's going to have to be accommodations that never would have been there had we had proper leadership. That tells every one of us that when we go to vote, we need to be very cautious about the leaders that we elect, because it takes a long time to clean up after a rotten leader.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure talking to you. Bob McEwen, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, let's get more analysis now from Michael Carpenter, former US ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe under President Biden. Ambassador Carpenter joins us now from Washington. Great to have you with us. You also served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. So I'm sure you're keeping a very close eye on what's happening in Riyadh. It seems the US-Russia negotiations ended without a major breakthrough, but there have been some mini breakthroughs. Are we getting closer, do you think, to a broader ceasefire agreement?
Well, unfortunately, I wish that were the case. I don't think that's what we're seeing. What we are seeing is a regeneration of talks that occurred roughly a year ago, where Ukraine was in talks through various intermediaries with Russia on elements of a Black Sea ceasefire. In fact, previously there was a sort of a tacit agreement between Ukraine and Russia not to strike each other's critical energy infrastructure. And so that is now factoring as an issue in the conversation that's being mediated by the United States. And then, of course, Ukraine and Russia have long had various channels through which they have exchanged prisoners. And so that continues as well. So in those three areas of humanitarian exchanges, maritime ceasefire, and energy infrastructure ceasefire, or at least a moratorium on strikes of some sort, those are conversations that have been ongoing for more than a year, for several years, and are being regenerated. Now, I don't think that that leads to a permanent ceasefire, because I don't think the fundamentals of this war have changed. And we can discuss that later, but I don't think this presages anything larger than what we've seen so far.
I mean, clearly no major breakthrough, as I said before the question started, but some small steps. And isn't getting to the point that we have a major breakthrough about some of these mini breakthroughs collectively paving the way to that sort of broader, perhaps 30-day ceasefire and then a more lasting peace beyond that? Isn't that what this is all about, mini steps?
Yeah, I think that is the strategy. I'm fully supportive of having some sort of a moratorium on strikes in the Black Sea to allow for commercial shipping, and especially for Ukrainian goods, agricultural goods, to be able to leave Ukrainian ports and go to various destinations around the world and feed hungry people. And then, of course, a moratorium on energy strikes would also be very positive. I don't think, however, that adds up to something bigger. So let me tell you why. Because look, the fundamentals of this war have not changed. Vladimir Putin wants to control Ukraine. He has always had that aim. He's been very clear about his objectives, and he has not moved one iota from his maximalist aims, which are to control the Crimean Peninsula, which he already controls, but to control it de jure, to also control in full the 4 regions of Ukraine that he currently partially controls, to ensure that Ukraine can never join NATO and that no NATO forces will deploy ever to Ukraine, and then to cap the size of the Ukrainian military over the long term by preventing its rearmament. Those are his conditions. He has not shifted from those conditions, and that amounts essentially to the capitulation of Ukraine. So I don't see how there is any space between the Ukrainian position and the Russian position where a deal can be struck, at least not in the near term.
Yeah, and I mean, we were just speaking to our guests earlier on and discussing how perhaps that stems from the fact that Russia is doing, by all accounts, better on the battlefield than it has been for quite some time, and that there's presumably very little appetite to pull back at this stage.
Well, so far, this administration has applied considerable pressure to Ukraine to get President Zelensky to the table. That included a cutoff of intelligence sharing with the Ukrainian military, which was essential, really, really important for Ukraine to be able to prosecute the war using that intelligence. And then also a temporary cutoff of security assistance that also showed the Ukrainians that, if they did not accede to the demands of this administration, that potentially all of their remaining security assistance from the United States would be jeopardized. However, no such leverage has been applied to Russia. There were sanctions in place. There remains considerable sanctions in place from the European Union and from the United States, but nothing additional has been put on the table by the current U.S. administration to compel Vladimir Putin to negotiate in good faith. So in the absence of that, I don't see how Putin backs off from his maximalist aims.
Yeah, indeed. And we're hearing, in fact, the opposite's happened. Sanctions targeting the Russian agricultural sector are reported to have been lifted. I mean, if that's the case, does it sound to you, because sanctions look like being one of the Trump administration's most powerful levers in these negotiations. Does it sound to you like they're using those levers in the best possible way in terms of achieving an outcome to these talks?
Yeah, I think when you're using leverage in a negotiation, you want to show that you're able to ramp up that leverage as you enter into the negotiation. And then if the other party is to compromise and make good on some sort of either a temporary or more lasting ceasefire, then one would remove sanctions pressure as a sign of good faith to continue the negotiation. But to remove that pressure from the start will apply. So the pressure currently is being applied to the victim in this war, Ukraine, while the aggressor, Russia, which has invaded Ukraine and has instituted a filtration camp system with egregious torture and just brutal interrogation methods, essentially trying to wipe out Ukrainian identity, is sort of given a pass and is, and as you say, the agricultural sanctions, the lifting of those, or at least the partial lifting of those that has been announced, removes some of that leverage and pressure on Moscow. So, if anything, the causation is running in the reverse direction from where you would expect it to be.
Do you think the American delegation goes back to the United States with just enough to show for their efforts there in Riyadh, or do you think they're going back empty-handed?
Well, I think Ukraine, again, will be very happy to enter into an agreement that sees more humanitarian exchanges, that has a pause on strikes on commercial ships in the Black Sea, and that allows for its energy grid to be reconstituted and repaired over the coming months. Whether they can agree to Putin's maximalist aims, I think no Ukrainian leader could agree to that, not Zelensky, not anybody else. And so, again, I think the larger piece remains elusive.
And obviously, you know Europe well, having your previous job, as we were saying, as we brought you into the conversation, was former ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe under President Biden. I'd like to ask you whether you think Europe is being sufficiently listened to and involved in this process, or perhaps you think they're right to be concerned that President Trump could be about to strike a deal with President Putin that undermines their security?
Well, European leaders very much want to have a seat at the table. They are worried that any sort of an agreement without security guarantees could be violated the very next minute as soon as the ink is dry on the agreement. And so the Europeans want to be able to support Ukraine. They want to be able to provide that leverage and support, leverage on Russia and support for Ukraine. However, the Trump administration holds a lot of cards here in terms of security assistance, in terms of intelligence sharing. The United States has been the largest military supporter of Ukraine since the beginning of this full-scale invasion. And so it's going to be very difficult for the Europeans to find a way to have a meeting of the minds with this administration and to really be applying the same negotiating strategy to both sides of this war.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time, but it's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Ambassador Michael Carpenter, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Now, the White House is insisting that no classified material was revealed during a chat between senior officials about strikes on Yemen. Well, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, revealed in an article that U.S. national security leaders, amongst them the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and the Vice President J.D. Vance, had inadvertently included him on a group chat about upcoming military strikes in Yemen. Well, Goldberg says that in their exchange on the messaging service Signal, these high-level officials had laid out plans which included precise information about weapons packages, targets, and the timing of the attack. Well, in his article, Goldberg said he received a connection request on Signal on the 11th of March from a user with the name Mike Waltz, that's the National Security Advisor, but with no further explanation. Then on the 13th of March, he says he was added to a group chat also on Signal entitled Houthi PC Small Group.
I received the attack plan from Pete Hegseth at 11:44 a.m. that Saturday, March 15th, and then saw the attack plan said that 1:45 p.m. Eastern time, that the first bombs would be dropping in Yemen. until that moment, until that period elapsed, the 2-hour period between that text and the first bombs being dropped, I thought it was a hoax. But what I did know was that the obvious answer was that this is a real conversation of the national security leadership of the United States. Seemed improbable to me, because why would they do it on Signal?
Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic speaking there. Well, when asked about this at the White House on Monday afternoon, President Trump told reporters he'd heard nothing about it. But today, President Trump dismissed that whole group chat security leak as a glitch and a non-issue.
I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
With the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis? Right. Well, it couldn't have been very effective, because the attack was very effective, I can tell you that.
President Trump speaking there. Well, there have been calls for those involved in the security breach to resign. Ken Martin, the chair of the Democratic National Committee, called on Pete Hegseth to resign or be fired from his position as Defense Secretary. Well, earlier on, Hegseth referred to Goldberg, that's the editor of The Atlantic, as, quote, a guy who peddles in garbage.
Talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops.
Pete Hegseth speaking there. Well, to discuss this issue with us, we're joined by Dennis Wilder, former Deputy Assistant Director of the CIA and Special Assistant to George W. Bush, who joins us from Washington. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. We're also joined by Sam Nunberg, former advisor to President Trump, who joins us from West Palm Beach in Florida. Thank you both very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Let me start with you, Dennis. War plans discussed there for military strikes in Yemen. Is this the sort of thing that high-ranking officials should be discussing on a forum like Signal? What are your thoughts?
Well, let me just say that I was 36 years in the intelligence community, 6 years on the National Security Council. I have never in my experience ever heard of anything like this. White House Communications Agency builds exquisite systems that they install in our homes. They put SCIFs in our homes. These are classified areas for us to discuss operational matters, covert actions, war plans, whatever. The whole point is to have an exclusive U.S. government system fully maintained for these kinds of conversations. Why anybody would think that Signal, a commercial system that can be broken, would be an appropriate place to discuss such matters is beyond me.
Okay, Sam, let me turn to you. We've got the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, John Ratcliffe, Director of the CIA, Tulsi Gabbard, discussing matters of state importance, of national security. Should they be doing it on Signal?
Well, I'm not an expert, or like my co-panelist here, Dennis, on what they should or they shouldn't be doing in terms of that. What I would say is perhaps it's the most problematic that they added Jeffrey Goldberg, of all reporters, to this conversation. As Pete Hegseth said earlier, Jeffrey Goldberg has had extremely negative reporting on Donald Trump, reporting going back as early as 2020 with background sourcing. And if there was anybody else they would have included, I think that it would be less of a story. On the other hand, what you do see with the response from the White House is they're not defending per se that they use Signal, but what they are saying is focus on what this mission is. And the mission is bombing the Houthis. The mission is clearing the navigation lanes. The mission is making sure the commons of navigation, the commons of trade are open. And that is a responsibility of the United States. And that is something that was advocated under the previous administration. I'll shortly say that I would remind this audience, and I'm sure Dennis remembers, that one of the first acts of the Biden administration was removing the Houthis from the terrorist watch list. And, this administration has inherited a very problematic national security scenario in that area of the world. And they are taking care of business there. So what I did see, and I wish I wasn't able to read this in the Atlantic, but what I did see was, and I did read the article, was decisive action taken. Was the president, was them having a coordinated a group. And let's just talk about who was in that group. I'm not defending that it was Signal, but one of the reasons that I feel that this administration has to feel that they have to go outside the norms of government is because of the way President Trump was treated by the national security apparatus in his previous administration, career people. So I would hope that there isn't a Signal group going forward on the Houthi attacks the Houthi defense operation by the United States.
Okay, Dennis, let me turn back to you. I mean, President Trump calling this a glitch. He says it's not an issue, not a serious problem. What would you say to that?
Well, first of all, I agree with my colleague that the Houthi strikes are entirely appropriate, necessary. They are terrorist. They are interrupting international commercial shipping. There is no reason to not prosecute conflict against them. In terms of what the president said, yes, this is a glitch. I would agree with him completely. And what I would hope is that this young National Security Council, this young National Security Advisor, will learn something from this experience and, frankly, never use Signal again. I understand, for example, at the Pentagon, there is a new report this morning that says people were warned against using Signal. Somebody has made a poor decision to tell the National Security Advisor that this is a system that he can use. So this is an error made by a new administration. I would hope they learn the lessons, and I would hope they never put a reporter on any of their internal communications again.
Sure. I mean, it looks like that particular error lies at the feet of Mike Waltz, because that's where the Signal invitation initiated from. He is, of course, for the benefit of our viewers, President Trump's national security advisor. But just going back to you, Sam, I mean, they're lucky in a way that Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic was the recipient, because he, I mean, perhaps you don't agree, but he seems to have done everything the way he should have done. He flagged this up, and he left that forum. But he could have stuck around, couldn't he, and been party to some pretty interesting information.
Well, in fact, he was party to some information there, as he claims at least, and he didn't show it in the article. There were plans given in advance of the attack, something like 2 hours. He had advance notice. Look, I'm not here to criticize his actions here. I was just talking about past reporting on President Trump, which I do find pretty reckless and pretty unprofessional. I don't even want to talk about the articles, but he tried to pull one out right before this election too in 2024, and it was just completely ignored by the media. But yes, I would say, he did leave the chat, and he notified them, and he reported it. And I do think that the American people deserve to know about this. And as Dennis said, this shouldn't happen again, and I hope they learn from it.
And in terms of what we learned from all of this, both of you, let me listen to you're just there and you give us a short answer, Sam. Let me ask you first, what stood out for you in terms of what we learned from this little fly-on-the-wall experience that we were given thanks to that glitch?
What was interesting to me was obviously Vice President Vance's comment. I'm assuming that he was not in the meeting in the Situation Room when the president had decided to go forward with the attack within 24 hours. And what we saw then was Stephen Miller, who's now deputy chief of staff. I remember working with Stephen when he was like number 3 in then Senator Jeff Sessions' office. And Stephen decisively say that the president has already decided to take action here, and they're going to move forward. What I also was interested in seeing was that they, not within this chat, but what they have also said was that they've asked Israel not to respond to these attacks similar to recent retaliatory attacks by the Houthis, similar to, let's say, when Saddam Hussein attacked Israel in 1991 during the Gulf War. And Israel has so far taken the advice of the United States. What I would also say, though, is one more point, is that perhaps this is even worse for the Houthis, because making this mistake with Signal certainly means that if they weren't going to, if the United States military was not going to be ordered by the president to finish this mission decisively, I can assure you they certainly are now.
Okay, Dennis, let me ask you for your opinion in terms of what we garnered from those snippets given to us by Jeffrey Goldberg.
Well, what I'm interested in, because of my experience on the National Security Council, is who the players were who were asked to be part of this decision-making process. I'm glad, for example, to see that the National Security Advisor had J.D. Vance, the Vice President, involved. J.D. Vance spoke his mind. That is what you're supposed to do in these kinds of meetings. He gave an opinion, and that's good to see. It means that the national security decision-making process is working. Now, as was noted, the president had made some decisions, so J.D. Vance, to some degree, was overruled, but that is also part of the national security process. So the good news here is that the national security process is working, and this demonstrated it, and that people are able to speak up in these meetings and make their positions known.
Just lastly, Dennis, to you, just really quickly, if you will, should anyone be punished?
If this was the work of a lower-level officer on the National Security Council and violated norms, absolutely. But I have no information yet to say who should be held accountable.
Okay, we're out of time. I'm really sorry that it's been shorter than we'd have liked, but thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. Dennis Wilder and Sam Nunberg, thank you very much indeed to both of you.
A pleasure. Thanks.
Well, that is all we have time for on this special edition of Global News Today. Thank you for watching. Be sure to join us again on Monday for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.
Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines. From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics, and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deep fake, and artificial intelligence,
they've got to have a vote and a say.
It's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
Presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on the